Good evening and welcome to the October 9th, 2024 East Lansing Planning Commission meeting. Mr. Bartley, would you please take roll?
Yes, thank you. Commissioner Boyd, Commissioner Chapin, Commissioner Denault, Commissioner Hendricks,
Here.
Commissioner Lapine,
Here.
Commissioner Overby,
Here.
Commissioner Williams, Vice Chair Wagner,
Here.
Chair Sullivan.
Here.
We have quorum.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Overby, seconded by Commissioner Lapine. Seeing no discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Ayes have it. Motion carries. It takes us on to item 1.3, approval of the minutes from the August 28th, 2024 Planning Commission meeting. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Vice Chair Wagner,
Second.
seconded by Commissioner Overby. Seeing no discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Takes us on to item number 2, committee reports. Landon, I didn't know if you wanted to give an overview of the comprehensive master plan process or not.
I'd be happy to. It's great to see you all here. We haven't had a planning commission meeting in the month of September, so it's been a little while, but since we last met at the end of August, the planning commission last met, we moved into climate month in a comprehensive plan update process. As you know, the 4 sort of most important topics that were identified by the community last year were social equity, public health, climate, and housing. And so at the end of, so August was our climate month activities with author Danielle Aragoni coming in, who wrote the book Climate Resilience for an Aging Nation. That was followed by a workshop in Patchurch Park. And then September, we moved into housing, focused on housing, and pushed some of the activities a little bit later in the month to account for student move-in. On the 24th, we had Michigan housing expert Ryan Kilpatrick from Flywheel Companies. He's based in Grand Rapids. And he came in and spoke to a group in this room about how housing works and how essentially how the forces, market forces are affecting housing and the housing market in East Lansing, and some potential policy changes that we could consider that could address some issues that we've been seeing in the local housing market, particularly affordability. So I heard a lot of very positive feedback about that session. That is on our website for the comprehensive plan update, which is cityofelastlansing.com/plan update. On that page, we have all the recordings that we have been able to take of the different meetings on there, so people can certainly visit that site and see Ryan Kilpatrick's presentation and talk, which I should mention was recorded by Video Pros, who's doing our recording tonight, and it's a great video, so please check that out. And then last Monday, on the 30th, we had a little pop-up housing workshop in downtown East Lansing, right there on Ann Street Plaza at the corner of Albert and Mack, and had a little tent set up and some ice cream from Tasty Twist and DJs out there, and a lot of passersby stopped and checked to see what was going on. Got some great feedback about housing in East Lansing and sort of needs, wants, challenges, including an exercise trying to identify what kind of housing forms should be where. And just sent some housing notes, some post-meeting notes from that today, but I haven't had myself too much ability to look through that and get all the conclusions, so I'll have more to report on that next time. But then just this Monday past, we've had an event here in this room called Every Plan Everywhere All at Once, and that was essentially a one-stop shop for all the planning processes we have going on all at the same time in various stages, various places in their process. We had our comprehensive plan update was represented there with myself and my staff, and Ingham County was there with some information about their housing conversations that they're having, including a session tomorrow night in Hannah Community Center here. We had the Department of Public Works with their weather resilience plan, with their non-motorized transportation plan. The Department of Parks and Rec is doing the Parks and Rec master plan update this year. We have the Valley Court Park, charrette is going on. So we had opportunities for input there. Michigan State University was here with information about their campus plan that was adopted in the last couple of years. One last thing, we had the library recently has been updating their strategic plan, and they were here. We also had the Primetime office with the seniors survey that's going on right now until the end of October, and also the age-friendly communities work group that's doing a lot of good work with Primetime in the planning department. So have a lot going on, but we had really, I thought, great turnout. We've had a lot of positive feedback. It's been really positive, very, very positive, and I'm super excited about that. I've had a couple requests, including from council members, to do this more often, more times per year. And we said, hey, we just tried this once, but we can certainly look at making it an annual or even biannual event. So that was great. Our next event coming up is actually next week, next Thursday, the 17th. We have Dr. Xenia Kotvall, who is the MSU's director of their Urban and Regional Planning Program, and she's going to be helping us take the next step as we start to wrap up this community engagement for this update. Now what, right? We want to make sure that we can translate all the feedback that we've been hearing, all the data we've been gathering, and translate that into an implementable plan. So that's going to be very exciting. That's also here in Hannah Community Center next Thursday, October 17th, 11:30 to 1. It's a brown bag lunch. So we're very excited to bring Dr. Kotvall here to help us along with this planning process. And then we'll have our next committee meeting for the coordinating committee for that update. Will be on October 23rd. Then we'll probably be a little quieter for a little while as we dig into really developing this plan document. And I'll keep updating the Planning Commission, of course. But we expect to start, once we have a document to shop around, we want to come back to the community, back to the Planning Commission and say, here's what we have so far. Did we hear correctly? Is this accurate? And give the community an opportunity for feedback before we step into the adoption process. So I've been very happy with how the comprehensive plan update is going. We've fit a lot into a relatively short time, but it's going very well. So any questions about the update? Yes, sir.
Just a quick question. Can you tell us a rough time frame for the master plan update? Like how's it going? When's it supposed to be done?
Yeah.
Implementation, that sort of thing.
So I would say the process, all in all, might look to be about a year and a half, and we're most of the way through that. We started last November with discussions here in the Planning Commission, or with the Commission, about should we move ahead with an update or do a new plan altogether. Thankfully, in my opinion, the Commission said, let's just update it. And so we've moving ahead with that. We started with community engagement in November and December to identify those top priority items. And then starting in January, did student engagement on campus. And that ran through April. And then April and May, we started doing the pre-planning work, identifying shared core values. And then we moved into those topical monthly meetings and author talks and workshops. So I would say that at this point, we're just under a year into the process. Our next step is creating that document, the sort of standalone update document that's meant to be essentially an addendum to the previous plan that was adopted in 2018, but will still stand on its own. With luck, I expect that we'll be taking this to sort of into the process for adoption and sending it out to surrounding communities for a review period early next year, and then hopefully see an adoption probably spring, if all goes well. And then my intent is to take a breather, but fairly quickly move into implementation steps. We want to look at and we'll be doing we'll move into implementation after we have the plan adopted, the plan update adopted. That would likely look to be some zoning ordinance amendments and policy changes and other actions that we see coming out of this plan. So, yes.
Can I just ask one quick follow-up?
Vice Chair.
Sorry. How is it adopted? Is it a vote by council, or is it, how do we officially adopt the master plan update?
The Planning Commission has the authority to adopt a master plan or master plan update. We certainly will bring it to council for review and recommendations.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you. Good questions. Commissioner Overton?
I just want to thank you, Landon, for your hard work on this plan and for your hard work in shepherding the plan through the development process. I've watched you do it, and I appreciate it a lot.
Well, thank you, Commissioner. And I would just say that it's not been one person. We have number one, I have a fantastic team that I'm very happy is now, I would say, complete. We don't have vacancies on our staff right now, and they've been doing great work. But also, we've had a very active coordinating committee that's very large, about 30 people, and they've been very, I guess, crucial as far as sort of getting the word out about different events and getting feedback and bringing it back in. So it's been a team effort. But thank you.
Thank you, and I echo those sentiments as well.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments from commissioners? All right, that takes us on to item number 3, staff reports.
I think I just gave it.
All right,
Yeah, I'm thinking of other things, but I don't have much to report.
just giving you a
right now.
second run at it. So
Thank you.
I'll
If I think of
consider
something,
those
I'll
concluded.
ask to change the agenda.
Item number 4, commissioner announcements. Any announcements from commissioners? Seeing none, that takes us on to item number 5, communication from citizens. We have no written communications in tonight's agenda packet, unless I'm mistaken. Written communications?
I'm sorry, we received written communications, but about agenda items that have a public hearing tonight.
Okay.
So
Must have received those this afternoon.
No, it's in the packet.
they're in the packet.
Okay. All right, well then, item 5.2, verbal from the audience. So we ask that you kindly keep your comments to 5 minutes. And it's preferable that you wait for a public hearing item. All the cards I have up here thus far for item 6.1 on the agenda. And if you have not done so already, please fill out the card up there with your identifying information. So do any members of the audience wish to come forward now or wait for the agenda item? All right, seeing. Yes, it's item 6.1, so they'll give the overview and then public comment period. All right, so anyone online in the queue wish to speak?
No one on the queue.
All right. Okay, yes, sure, please do.
Tim Brzezowski, 613 Grove Street. So I just wanted to find out a little bit more about the master plan process, update process. I think most community members were under the impression that the map might be updated. And I was talking to Landon at the housing meeting there, and he said, no, there would be no revisions to the map. But then I was talking to the planning consultant who's assisting you, and then I had heard that some city council members were anticipating some map changes. So I wanted to clarify whether that was happening or not, because I think most people expected there might be some change. And then the other one is, and I was going to comment on this before, but a year ago after we had these properties there, I took it upon myself to draft a model R4 ordinance, and I submitted it to City Council and Planning, but from what I can see, it's never been addressed anywhere. And I don't know if you're aware of it, or if you've read it, or if you've seen it, but it seems to me like it was drafted specifically with these types of properties in mind to allow for some redevelopment, but development that suited sort of the mass and character of the surrounding neighborhood. So I'd like to find out what the status is and why. I guess either City Council hasn't really advanced it, or planning, or maybe you have looked at it, I don't know, but I haven't received any notice or indication that anybody's even read it. And that was a year ago in October, after we did this before. So I guess I would like to get answers to those two questions if I could. Thank you.
Sure, I'll just say as a general comment, the comprehensive master plan group has not made any decisions yet. We haven't yet reached that part of the process, so there's been no talk of rezoning or any of those sorts of decisions have yet to be made. So other than that, Mr. Bartley, would you like to add anything?
I'd love to speak very, very quickly on those. I guess we as we approached this process, the intent was not to change the future land use map from what was previously adopted. However, things have changed in the last 5 years or 6 years since the previous plan was adopted. And one of the activities of the coordinating committee coming up is to look at just that and see the discrepancies, essentially, if and where there are discrepancies between our current zoning and our future land use map, understand essentially what the scope of those discrepancies are and where they are, and then make a determination of whether or not an action step coming out of this update process should be to update the future land use map. So I certainly think that it's a possibility that hasn't really been contemplated as an activity to happen during the update process, but more as, in fact, an implementation step that could be quite early on. Another activity that the coordinating committee will be looking at is to identify, are there specific sort of special areas that we should be focusing our planning efforts on in the near future. We've identified already in discussions with commissioners and among staff and council members that there might be at least possibly 3 different planning areas that we might look at, but we certainly want to that's on the agenda as far as the committee goes, and I could see that being a fairly early implementation step as well, is identifying those planning areas and then moving towards planning for that. As far as the proposed R4 district, and we've talked, Ms. Mrozowski, we certainly are aware of it. We're holding on to it. We haven't forgotten, haven't thrown it away. In discussions last year when it was originally introduced, there was some general feeling that the comprehensive plan update is going on. Introducing a new zoning district might muddy the water, so to speak. So there was some sort of hesitancy in even considering a new zoning district, and that's continued to my knowledge today. I'm certainly open to, if council or the commission were to have a recommendation to look at it sooner, we can certainly explore that. From the staff perspective, I'm hesitant, but we can certainly look at it if that's the desire of the commission. So
Thank you.
that's all.
Appreciate the background. It's helpful. Vice Chair?
I'm not sure how we decide if it's important to us or when we do, but I do think the master plan, when it was last developed, there was a big focus on downtown development and density increase. And the downtown has radically changed since that time. So I don't know, like, maybe we've met that goal. Maybe we don't need to focus on density downtown anymore. And there was the steps, like large buildings and smaller buildings stepping down to the neighborhoods, and I think it'd be worth a conversation. I'd certainly be interested in opening this up, and future land use. I had some disagreements with where the master plan, said that there should be increased density, and it was a conversation that I went to one of the elementary schools, and they had maps up, and I enjoyed talking to people with different points of view and hearing what other people thought, and so I would be interested in this, and I don't know. I don't know if we take a vote on it or how we decide when, if, how we talk about future land use for the city. But I do think things have radically changed downtown, so it's worth at least a conversation, in my opinion.
Thank you.
I think you talked about how once the plan is finalized, it'll be sent to the Planning Commission and then City Council for feedback. So I think that would certainly be part of the process, as well as all the public feedback that they're undertaking right now.
Yes, and I think coming out of the next, at least the October committee meeting, if not in November, that will be a topic of discussion. I'd be interested in bringing that back to the Planning Commission, probably perhaps before January, to discuss the future land use map and maybe determine as a follow-up to the committee's discussions, which I'm sure there will be some good discussion about the future land use map and whether that should change. I think that's certainly worth discussing among the Planning Commission.
Great. Thank you. Any remaining questions? All right, seeing none, that takes us to tonight's public hearings. First up is item 6.1, a public hearing for Ordinance 1540, a request from Hagen Realty, Inc. to conditionally rezone 743, 755, and 765 Grove Street from R2 to RM32 for the construction of a multifamily residential building with up to 48 bedrooms and associated parking. Mr. Bartley?
Thank you. So this request is, as you mentioned, a conditional rezoning request for 743, 755, 765 Grove. I'm pulling up the aerial on the screen right now. So this is Grove Street, just north of Bircham Road. We have the Hannah Community Center where we are now at the far left side of the picture, and then Bircham heading out to the east. 1 block away is Grove, and Grove goes up to the north to Library Lane. So these 3 properties are located on the west side of the street, just immediately south of the church that I'm, All Saints Episcopal Church. The zoning of these properties is all currently, excuse me, it's all currently R2, medium density single family residential, and the applicant is seeking to conditionally rezone, again, just these 3 properties, conditionally rezone to RM32, the city center multifamily residential district, in order to facilitate the construction of a multifamily residential building. I just want to point out on the zoning map, there's a slight discrepancy. There's what looks like sort of the rear half of 65 Grove is actually part of the church property to the north and is also zoned RM32, not R2 as it's shown. So these 3 properties are in question. Those are zoned R2, and they're proposed to be conditionally rezoned to match the RM32 zoning of the property to the north. And earlier, there was a similar proposal that came before you last year that contemplated a similar development, but on 7 properties. And this is not that. So again, this is limited to 3 properties, 743, 755, and 765 Grove Street. The conditional rezoning request is to essentially would rezone these properties with the condition that a development is approved on these properties, and the development being what's requested. It's a 48 bedroom split across 5 or more dwelling units, and each with 4 or fewer bedrooms. So the exact layout of how many units and how many bedrooms in each is somewhat up to for discussion. And that said, what we've received from the applicant, the site plans that are in your packet, are relatively conceptual and are labeled as such. So should you recommend, and tonight is a public hearing, so no vote is expected, but we would bring this back to you at your next meeting on October 23rd for a vote, unless you decide you want to postpone it because you need more information. So I guess I just want to clarify that should this be conditionally rezoned and be recommended for approval by the Planning Commission, or even not, when the City Council would receive a recommendation and decide whether or not to approve the conditional rezoning, that would be conditioned on a development with the details to be determined through site plan review on this property, which would be combined. So we have a general idea that the applicant is proposing a multifamily residential building with 5 or more units, each with 4 or fewer bedrooms per unit, a total of up to 48 bedrooms. Beyond that is conceptual. So if so then, if this were to be conditionally rezoned and that was approved, then the applicant would then come back through the process of site plan review, which requires a Planning Commission review and a public hearing, and City Council review as well. At that point, the details of the exact site layout beyond the conceptual plans that are included in your packet today, we'd hammer those out and come up with a site plan that meets the requirements of the zoning ordinance and meets the conditions of this conditional rezoning. But again, the condition is fairly simple here, as offered by the applicant, that a development be approved by the Planning Commission and City Council. If a development here is not approved through that site plan review process, then the rezoning would not continue, and we would start the process to revoke that rezoning, essentially by staff through the Planning Commission rezoning process. That said, I guess, I'm happy to go through some of the details of what was submitted for the site plan, but it's somewhat less, I guess, relevant to this request at the current time, because essentially all that's being contemplated is, should these properties be rezoned from R2 to RM32 with the expectation of having a 48 bedroom multifamily building on these properties. I want to call out just a relatively minor error in my staff report. On page 6, I have a table that compares the different designations within the master plan from 2018 for these properties. To give you an idea of whether or not the proposed rezoning is I guess, matches that of the future land use map. I wrote that the 755 and 765 Grove are within the R4 designation. Those are actually within the M1 designation, which is a mixed-use designation. 743 Grove is the one that's designated R4. So I essentially have the addresses in top row switched. But the description of the R4 designation is primarily multifamily housing, allows for row houses, small to medium-sized multiplex building types. And that's the designation of 743 Grove, the southernmost parcel. It would allow, generally, the previous comprehensive plan, the current comprehensive plan that has this R4 designation, talks about residential uses with ground floor office, care facilities, neighborhood commercial, but on a limited basis. It contemplates 2.5 stories or 35 feet in height, potentially going up to 4 stories under certain circumstances, has a density of about 16 units per acre. The analogous zoning districts for the R4 designation are RM8 and RM14, so slightly less dense than the RM32 that's requested. The M1 designation, which is of the 2 properties to the north, 755 and 765 Grove, is a mixed-use designation. It doesn't match the R2 zoning or the RM32. There's essentially no analogous zoning district in our current form. And I should mention, including the R4 that was proposed, but it would be a mix of low-intensity neighborhood service type commercial uses for single-family type rental properties that in the M1 would also allow for retail, office and residential, row house, mixed use, live work, and small or medium-sized multiplex buildings, up to 3 stories or 48 feet in height. But the closest, I'm sorry, and I misspoke, the closest analogous zoning district to this is B1. Again, that's a low-intensity business district, but that's not what was proposed here. So the designations are meant to help you understand what did the previous comprehensive plan sort of envision for these properties. The comprehensive plan is a guidance document. It can be, you don't have to hold fast to it, but you should at least make that a major consideration in whether or not the zoning district should change. And so the applicant is seeking to conditionally rezone from R2 to RM32 as a residential district that's slightly more dense than R8 or RM14 that are the analogous zonings to R4 designation. And is not a business district, which is the more analogous zoning to the M1 designation. I feel like I'm throwing a word salad at you, and I'm sorry. I'd like to take questions at this point about anything I've just said, or if you'd like more detail on anything.
I have a series of questions, but I defer to the commission first, so is Commissioner Lapine?
So, I'm sure it comes as no surprise to anyone, I'm not an urban planner, so this is outside of my normal realm. But what you're describing, Landon, when you went through all of the different types of zoning, is it fair to say that what is proposed before us does not necessarily fit within what's outlined in the comprehensive plan? Are we trying to fit a square peg in a round hole?
It's hard to say what fits. I would say it's not an exact fit to either the R4 or the M1, but it's not dissimilar, especially dissimilar. It talks about the row houses, it
Yeah.
talks about multifamily dwellings.
Which- yeah.
So uses as what's proposed are certainly within those
Okay.
those designations, but it's not an exact match.
Okay, and do you mind if I ask my other question?
No, please.
Can you help me understand the 48 bedrooms across 5 units? That seems like a lot.
It could be more than 5 units. Essentially, I looked at the plan that the applicants presented, the conceptual plan, and they said, we want a development like this. And what they showed, the closest, I guess, land use as defined within the RM32 is a multiple family dwelling containing 5 or more dwelling units, each dwelling unit containing 4 or more or fewer bedrooms. So the 48 units could be, 48 bedrooms could be spread across 5, could be spread across 8 or 10. I believe they showed on their
Okay.
conceptual plan 7 doors.
Okay,
But it's a conceptual plan.
yeah,
So the distribution of those bedrooms, those up to 48 bedrooms, would be up to a future site plan to be approved.
that would be like sort of step 2 of what you described before, what we are essentially discussing tonight. That would be like step 2 of when we actually get into the nitty-gritty of a site plan, if we were to approve
Yes.
the
Yep.
conditional rezoning.
Correct.
And my
the
last
conceptual
question-
site plan
Yep.
and plans have been shown,
Yeah,
but they're conceptual.
They're conceptual
The
in
applicant
nature.
is here,
Yep.
and I'm sure can answer more questions though about that.
and my last question is, I'm just confirming to make sure I understand. If we were to approve this conditional rezoning, it would only be for this specific development?
For something close to this specific development, because it's conceptual plans, the
Could
closest
another
we can get.
developer propose the same thing if we were to conditionally rezone it?
If a, yeah,
We would
Yes.
still see the.
yes, I mean, the applicant would have to
Okay.
transfer those to a new developer. But they would be within their rights then to come with a site plan and say,
Mm-hmm.
you've approved zoning conditional on a building with up to 48 bedrooms, containing
guess
5,
my-
across 5 or more dwelling units
Yeah.
with 4 or fewer bedrooms
Okay,
per
so
unit.
you're answering my question, I just wanna make sure I get it. So if we were to conditionally approve this rezoning, at, say, the next meeting, when we dug into it again, we could have a similar proposal from, I'm making it up, from DTN?
Mhm.
Okay,
Sure.
okay, I'm good, those are my questions.
No, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions from commissioners? So you already talked about the first one. I was going to ask you about this application in the context of the master plan, so I appreciate you going over that. The second question I have is, do you have any historical information about flooding or water in the area? I'm trying to envision what the grading looks like, what way the water flows with the church behind it, or if the grading would, I mean, there's no site plan, so it's impossible to say. But could you talk generally about the 700 block there, and I guess a little bit of Abbott, if there's a history of flooding?
Not really. I don't have that history.
It's worth asking.
You were honest.
So-
Yeah, I would love to find out, and I can have more information at your next meeting.
Okay, I think that'd be helpful
Yeah, that would
to
be
have at the next meeting, considering, the obvious reason I asked, with a lot of people having concerns and a lot of conversations ongoing about that. And then I think potentially for the next meeting, it would be helpful if we could get a comparison of our RM14 and RM22. I guess just to be candid, I'm a bit confused as to why this is being requested, and I can ask the applicant about it when they come up here. As RM32, it seems like they're stuffing a lot into a smaller lot. I think it made more sense to me when this was, what was it, 6 or 7 parcels before, but now that it's kind of shrunk down to 3, I'm not sure it makes as much sense. And I think, just thinking out loud, but that'd be helpful information to have as we're kind of considering and, discussions are ongoing. So that's all the questions I have for you, unless there's any other questions from commissioners. Okay, I think I have cards up here from the applicant, so Matt Hagan, Brian Hagan.
All right, I'm Brian Hagan, Hagan Realty. I apologize, I did have a long series of notes here, but I think between your guys' questions and Landon's description, maybe I won't go through all of it, but I'd love to answer questions too, I guess, maybe, after as well. So I guess what are we proposing? Sounds like, we've heard the general description of it. Most importantly, it's a conditional rezoning, as Landon said. That was proactive on our part, due in part to some of the comments from council, planning commission previously, as well as some of the nearby residents. So we wanted to provide some reassurance that, we don't have this giant parcel that we can just kind of do whatever we want with. We wanted to say, hey, here's a site plan. This is the parcels that we're doing it on. And here's what it's going to look like. So that was the reason for the conditional rezoning. And then, of course, the parcels, as Landon mentioned as well. Also, really important, I think it was mentioned a little bit maybe at planning and council, but more specifically with the residents, the unknown of rezoning on the previous proposal, rezoning 7, I think it was, parcels, and us saying, hey, we're only going to develop 3 of them. That was, our mistake in a sense, because we thought, well, we should rezone all the way to Bircham, because that's kind of naturally how it's always been done in the past. We have no intention at that time, we certainly have no intention now of developing beyond the 3 parcels that we own. So again, providing some reassurance to all those involved that this is in fact what we want to develop and where we want to develop. So, my next note, how is this proposal different? I think I touched on all of that, but I just want to make it clear that this is in response to the comments that we heard here, council, and from the residents. So that's our goal. So I guess naturally, you mentioned why RM32. That happened to be my next note. So I think visually, if you look at the map right there, all the purple is RM32. And actually north of the purple at the top of the screen is also RM32. And then kitty corner behind it, also RM32. What's probably not shown on that map is if you go down south to Bircham, along there, down MAC, et cetera, it's purple all over the place. The purple is RM32. So we believe that it is a natural continuation of RM32 with what's there. In addition to that, the next parcel beyond the scope of our rezoning is 2 down from that, is a fraternity building, which of course, cannot be approved in anything but RM32. So not only are we asking for it because it's a continuation, but we believe RM32 represents what's on the ground, which is when I was on the comprehensive plan committee 5 or 6 years ago, that was one of our driving factors was, when looking at these areas, how are we deciding what these zones should be? We looked at what was currently on the ground and how that fits with a zoning area. So that was some of the reasoning behind it. Certainly there's a high concentration of rental in the area, not just RM32, but just rental in general, ranging anywhere from the fraternity, which is, I don't know what it is, 20 people, 30 people or something in there, down to, license for 2 family type rental as well. So we absolutely believe that it does fit in the comprehensive plan. Again, I was on that committee. We spoke about this area specifically long before we owned it, and that was one of the determinations. You touched on the R4, as well as the M1, the square peg kind of thing. I think you're right a little bit. There is no perfect designation, but the M1 being more of a business zoning, which actually would allow a 4-story building, mixed-use building by right, seems a little out of place. Certainly, I think we would all agree on that. Whereas, the R4 being, a little less dense, put the 2 together, you kind of get RM32. But more so, I think that, as Landon mentioned, the style of building that is represented throughout the comprehensive plan is virtually identical to what we're proposing. I think in your packet you have a side-by-side comparison. Those are all buildings that we built, well, he built, and they are almost exactly what the comprehensive plan is calling for. So I know Darcy is no longer with the city, but one thing that Darcy Smith used to always say when we were talking about the comprehensive plan, because I was always asking, well, what can things be licensed for, because that's big with what we do, what is it going to be licensed for? And one thing that she reiterated over and over again was, don't worry so much about what it's licensed for, look at the scale of the buildings that were put, look at the pictures, look at that. You want to be able to go by the building and say, that's a nice looking building. It fits within, the scope of the neighborhood and so on, which we believe this would. It is something that we are proposing would be licensed for, up to 48. The unit makeup, I believe we have some notes on that. Maybe my brother can touch on that. It's not just 5 units. That would be a lot. It's 14 total units actually. So it's a combination, and this was purposeful. It's a combination of townhome style units with also more traditional apartment units that range anywhere from a 4-bedroom townhome that would have potentially have a lower level to a more traditional 2, 3, 4-bedroom apartment, and even some studios or 1-bedrooms. Because let's be honest, you have to provide a mix of units, and that's what we intend to do. So, moving away from, I guess, the building itself, I know there's always concern about traffic. It's a fair point, but I think that in this particular location, being that you have an exit to the north that gets you out onto Abbott, a major thoroughfare, of course, immediately to the south onto Bertram, which of course you can go east, west, wherever you want to go pretty much from there. While I understand naturally if you put 40 some people in that area, the natural concern is that there would be more traffic, more activity. But I believe that there is absolutely enough egress. There's more egress on this site than virtually any development we've ever done, because you can get north, south, east, west without going through the neighborhood, and that's just with a vehicle. In reading the staff report, I noticed there was a lot of talk about various other means of transportation, scooters, walking, biking, etc. So I think it's not realistic to think that if we had 40 members on this site or 40 people parking, that these 40 people are all going to be coming and going all at the same time. It's not realistic. It's not how activity is in this area for sure. Walking to class, walking to downtown. Certainly using scooters. Hopefully not throwing them in the river. And then most importantly, I think that as it relates to some of the members that are here to inevitably speak against us, driving down the 600 block of Grove is also very unrealistic. I'm not saying that no cars will go down past the 600 block of Grove. However, if you guys have driven down there, you get to the end, you're not getting to downtown. You're getting to, you're veering to the left, you're heading back out. So I don't think that that's going to become a cut through. I just, I drive that way myself. It's frustrating even for me, and I know the neighborhoods, and if I want to get to downtown, I'm not going down Grove because you're just not going to get to downtown. So while there absolutely will be some increase, in foot traffic, bike traffic, car traffic, I believe that the site can accommodate that based on the various means of egress. So beyond that, I think Landon covered most of it. I don't want to get too ahead of ourselves with the building specifically, but we are proposing a site plan, a building that does not have any, would not require any variances. As far as, obviously we'd have to be approved for the zoning, but then it would not be, we would not be asking for any variances, which is very common. So no setbacks, no lot coverages, everything would be, would meet the RM32 code. There is no historic district parcels that are included in this. I know that was mentioned. That is not the case. I'm kind of bouncing around here, but you mentioned All Saints Church. I know that they've expressed their approval in our process, in our project. We've continued to receive emails, from Kit Carlson, who is since retired. She said she would come speak, email, whatever. She is in favor of this, which is important, I think, because she is, in fact, the immediate neighbor and would be, in fact, the most affected by this potential development. And I think, last but not least, we should mention that there is definitely a financial benefit to the city for this. It's not a driving factor. It's not the reason you should approve us specifically. But, I think it is important, to mention that because we're talking 3 to 4 times the additional property tax revenue for a development like this. So, so my brother is here if you have building specific questions, if we want to go that route. And obviously I'm happy to answer any questions as well.
Thanks for the overview. Vice Chair?
Sure. Hi.
Hi.
Thank you very much for the your overview. I like when you have written here, like, what's new, what's different than our last proposal, how's it changed, and I appreciate the fact that you've addressed a lot of concerns that staff have had, we've had, and the community has had. I have a couple questions for you about this, and I'm just wondering. My first question, so how many people are currently, like, how many beds, or what is the rental license? What is the increase in density that you imagine? Is it going from 12 to 48?
Sure.
What is that number?
Right, so part of the reason that we think it's a site that's prime for redevelopment is 2 of the parcels on there are currently vacant.
Okay.
One is licensed for 7. The one that, the 743 is a cinder block structure that's been on and off vacant for, well, my brother's staying there temporarily, but it's been vacant for on and off for 20 plus years. He's not moving in there permanently or anything. Very outdated on the inside and of course on the outside as well. So the increase, yes, there would be an increase, no question. But I guess what you're getting rid of is, again, 2 parcels that are, or two properties that are vacant and one that's licensed for 7.
I am a little increased about, I drive that way to go to the library with my family a lot, and Grove Street, there seems to be a lot of cars parked on there. So can you talk a little bit more about your parking plan? Will it reduce the number of cars because people will be, parked not on the street anymore? Or
Sure. Yeah. Certainly we're going to meet the parking requirement the best we can. There's sort of a little bit of a gray area there, right? Because we can ask for it says you have to provide 50% or cannot provide more than 50% on site. We're big believers in parking. Mr. Meadows has heard that probably for 25 years now. We've built buildings smaller on purpose just to accommodate parking because we're believers in parking, no question. Our plan that is currently shown would accommodate, I believe, up to 40 out of the potentially 42 to 48 residents. We believe that that's a huge benefit because they're contained on our site and they're not sprawling into the neighborhoods, trying to find parking. Our office is over by the hub. It's been a disaster. You have 100 and some parking spots for almost 600 people, and there's only so much parking you can rent. There's only so many places you can park, so they push into the neighborhoods and in the businesses and so on. So I believe that by parking them on site, it will reduce that issue for sure.
I walked by it tonight and I know it's a really deep.
It is very
deep lot,
200.
which I was surprised by.
Yeah.
And I see there are a lot of trees there. Is the plan to take out all the trees, leave some of the trees? I do
Sure.
know concerns about stormwater runoff and trees.
Yeah, no question.
Trees are good, but-
I guess from a technical standpoint,
Yeah.
obviously we'll meet any sort of landscaping plan, et cetera.
Right.
There is, trees focused around the perimeter. If any of that stuff can be saved, certainly, that would be great. It's sort of a catch-22, right? The parking also has to kind of go towards the back because you don't want to. But we've spoken to one of the first conversations with Ms. Carlson next door, was shielding because they have the playground and so on. So there will, no question, there will be, some sort of tree line along there as well.
can I ask just one more quick
Yeah,
question?
go ahead.
Sorry.
Yeah, you're
this
fine. Yeah.
I was here for the last go around, so I
Yeah,
I
yeah.
appreciate you guys coming back.
Yeah.
So my question, my final question is, I think it's a little bit disingenuous in here when you say that, most of the things are 32, are zoned M32. It's not quite true. Like there's Ridge Road, and there's a minority of single-family homes there.
Sure.
What is your plan for being a good neighbor, helping these people? Because, we want to keep a balance, right, of rentals.
Of course. Yeah. Yep. I actually know some of those people.
Yeah, yeah, right.
I'd say, well, for one, I guess to address the first thing he's mentioned, leading up to the parcel, all RM32, surrounding it elsewhere, lots of RM32. That's sort of what I'm referring to. No question, you're right. Down Ridge is all R2. I think one positive thing we have going for us there is that it's a dead end. Traffic, foot traffic, vehicle traffic. There's no reason to go down there, So that's certainly a positive thing. And I think, from a good neighbor standpoint, I think it just comes back to, we're hands-on. We work every single day. We're a family business. We have several employees that live in town. We live in town. Our families live in town. We've got after hours, maintenance lines. We've got, we are as hands-on as it gets. And so if there's a complaint, certainly coming from Ridge Road, if Mark Sprinkle's calling me up saying, we got trash in his front yard, that's going to be a problem. That's a friend of mine, And so I think that I can't speak specifically to how we would design the development other than, it's not porches out front and balconies and things like that, certainly. Which I think minimizes that and pushes that type of activity to the back of the site. But it's an operational thing, and I think that's where we differ tremendously from out-of-town developers. They're coming here, they're putting in their plan, and they're out of here. And that's not us, not at all.
Great. Thank you.
Yep, thanks.
Any other questions? All right. So the first up, the water issue we talked about, and the flooding issue. I don't know if you're aware of the history of that site, if that's an issue there, or what your plans are to mitigate it.
Matt, maybe you could speak to this some. I know that when we built things in the past that have anything, below grade or anything like that, or our foundations that we built, primarily we use precast concrete. So from a building specifically, addressing that. Certainly from a construction standpoint, we're well aware of that. We've done that. He's done that many, many times. So specific to the building, we plan to address that. We don't have any, historic knowledge of any flooding on that site specifically. Certainly it's a concern just in general. I will say, it's, I don't want to say unfair, maybe not the right word, but when we talk about the recent events, we're talking about a 1,000-year storm. I live in Walnut Heights. He lives, across Saginaw. Every neighborhood had water. My son's car was actually ruined just driving down just a regular residential street because the water came up on it. So I think trying to view this project in the context of the storms that we've had recently is maybe not how things are going to be, moving forward. No question, water is a concern. I think that there's other meetings in place that are maybe working to address some of that. But specific to our site, obviously he can speak to a building aspect of it, but we're certainly going to do whatever we can to help with that.
Do you own the two row-style houses on the 500 block of Albert?
We do. Yep.
Okay. About how many are in each of those buildings?
21
How many bedrooms?
in each.
21
building.
bedrooms.
21 in each building.
In each building?
Yeah.
Okay.
Total 7.
So this development is proposed is essentially like
It looks a
combining
lot
both
like
of
that.
the two buildings?
We have a building that looks almost identical to those buildings over on Durand that has 18 people in it, which kind of goes back to my previous comment. Building looks the same, occupancy is slightly different. The unit makeup on the interior is a little different. The ones on Albert are townhomes, three-story townhomes. The ones on Durand are 2-story and traditional apartments above it, which would be more comparable to what we're talking about here. But again, if you drive by it, they look virtually identical.
I like the idea of townhouses, you know,
Very popular,
The
you know.
housing, yeah, the housing study that we had done said it was the most needed housing type.
Yes.
This, what you're proposing, though, just seems very dense for that area, and I think a problem from a planning perspective that Block has is it has a little bit of everything, right? It has kind of an identity crisis. You've got the fraternity house, an apartment building, yeah, sorority across the street. Like, it just doesn't really make a ton of sense. That's why I was a little disappointed that it was the southern parcels weren't more of the focus, because I think that area is like would be right for townhomes, like for families to live there, and that would be kind of a great community feel. You're by the high school. So I guess why didn't you consider RM22 and RM14? I know you mentioned it's because perhaps it's zoned similar to what's zoned to the north, but it just seems like a lot of bedrooms to fit on that site. And I don't know if the numbers won't work if you can't get that many bedrooms or what the situation is. I guess, how amenable are you to looking at different
Yeah.
ideas for that site?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I've looked on the map. I mean, there's very few RM or RM22 sites even in the entire city, I guess. So I'm not as familiar with that zone. Certainly it creates some issues, you know, from a setback standpoint, which then of course has a domino effect on parking and things like that. You know, I think that it still wouldn't change, I guess, in my opinion. You know, it wouldn't necessarily even change the height or scaling, you know, mass of the building, which, if that's a concern, I guess. But yeah, I'm not as familiar with RM22, to be honest, because it rarely even exists in the city. RM32, again, just was natural based on the other buildings that we built on Albert, on Durand, and these places. You know, it really it gives more flexibility from you know, from a lot coverage, setback, parking perspective.
To be clear, though, would it be possible to make this proposal work if there were less bedrooms, or does the number of bedrooms really what solidifies it for you?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't know that the answer to that, you know, down to like the penny as far as how many people we're trying to fit in it. I mean, we looked at RM32, backed into that, of course, and said, okay, you know, here's our framework, you know, 60% coverage, 30% ground coverage. What's the size of the building? And then that's kind of our process. You know, we break down the size, and then of course we want to fit in, you know, more than just 4 bedrooms. You know, it fits some 1 beds, some 2 beds, and that's within that 3 parcel scope. 42 is barely going to make it, apparently. He worked more with the architect. He's the builder. And obviously, we don't own the other 4 parcels.
Okay, that was my next
of course, and when we did propose the rezoning of all 7, we received a lot of pushback.
Okay,
Would be an understatement.
understood. Thank you. Is there any other questions from commissioners? Seeing none, thank you for your overview and answering our questions.
Appreciate it.
At
Thank
this point, we will open up the public hearing. I do have a list of cards up here. So first up is Deborah Stewart.
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to communicate together. I'm sharing a letter from the Stewart family. It is in support for maintaining College Grove as a historic district by maintaining the current R2 single-family zoning of 743, 745, and 765 Grove, and therefore denying the rezoning of 3 properties to RM32 in the 700 block of Grove, as we feel RM32 is no longer appropriate. We recognize it was previously identified, but there have been great amounts of building in the past 6 years and the 2 years during the time that the master plan was being reviewed. First, thanks to East Lansing Planning Commission members for being active listeners and your voluntary service to the East Lansing community. Our father, Roger Stewart, spent many hours researching and discussing with residents when serving on East Lansing Board and Commissions over a 20-year period. As a property tax appeals consultant, he was very aware of how your decisions of zoning affected the worth of properties and particularly the composition of a neighborhood. We write and speak to you as some of the persons, along with my neighbors, who are most affected by your decisions this evening and in the future. I've grown up and studied and taught and researched and lived in the College Grove area for over 60 years. During this time, our family members and I have paid taxes to the city of East Lansing and chosen to reside in the location due to walking distance to schools, the university where we work, and the libraries. The area continues to be ideal for families and young professionals. There's no reason to rezone the 3 residential properties identified in the application and deny current R2 single-family zoning when 3 families with infants have recently moved to the Grove and Ridge Road areas, both 4th and 3rd generation. Rental homes for single families and young professionals are needed in the area. Most important to your decision this evening, which is important to consider, and that's the need to improve infrastructure of water, sewage, drainage, and road safety for the current residences of Grove Street and those using the area to the library and high school. A decision to approve rezoning requests before infrastructure additions are made on Grove Street to address current use would be remiss of each East Lansing Planning Commission member for any reason or rationale. I can share that our entire 600 block of Grove Street, both streets and sidewalks, were completely flooded for 2 days, not only during the July rains, but at other times as well. Added building structures, more cement, and an increase of high-rise apartment building with an additional 48 units with multiple persons residing would knowingly worsen the existing infrastructure problem. I can share that in these 64 years of living on Grove Street, we did not have flooding in our basements, myself and neighbors, until the Planning Commission rezoned a historic home to a sorority. Black mold is also apparent in some of the residents of 600 block. Rezoning decisions such as this one can continue to increase student housing in the area and disallow single families and children with yards to play in. Each of your decisions, as this one, has changed the historic College Grove area from a green historic neighborhood to a more transient student population. Each decision chips away at a sense of community. I'm one of many neighbors who continue to have a positive vision for the future of Grove and Ridge Roads. Together, we have given positive energies through our life energies, careers, interactions with others, and the care of our properties to make East Lansing a welcoming community to all persons. Most concerning is the fact that rezoning to RM32 specifically allows for many more uses than what is addressed in the application. The applicant could consider more appropriate areas for a location. There are no benefits to rezoning or demolishing single-family homes on Grove to the benefit of only the rental company in order to overbuild in an existing historic neighborhood. Thank you. I also noted that a high school student was hit and had a hit and run in the past year since the changes have been made. Lastly, I would like to say that it's important to note that change in RM32 zoning on Grove is based on an outdated 2017 and earlier planning master plan, which is now not applicable, as so many new apartment high-rises and buildings have been built in the area since the plan was developed and devised. There's no need for apartment complexes to the area. However, there is a need for R2 single-family rental home options for persons interested in residing in the area. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Tim Rosowski?
I submitted just a few written comments, and then I was hoping to show a video, because you asked about the kind of the flooding in the area. So
Yeah,
I think, there may or may not be flooding on those particular parcels, but there sure is in our neighborhood. So I brought in a video. This is the June 17th event, but we had the same thing in July. And so Landon said I couldn't show it here. Let me just pull it up, and then you can just pass it around here. So what happens is all of these properties go to the corner of Bircham and Abbott. They drain to Bircham and Abbott. So this parcel would also drain there as well. So what happens is the drain from Bircham and Abbott, which leads south, doesn't appear to be adequate to really handle the drainage. So when that can't handle the drainage, it backs up into our neighborhood. So in this particular event, we needed to replace the carpet in the basement. Okay, just moving on here. Before I just don't want to dwell on this R4 because I don't have much time here, but please read it. If you have you seen it? If you've seen it, read it. I really encourage City Council to look at it. It was specifically developed to address these transitional neighborhoods. I think its principal elements that you might consider would be some of the comments that were made here is it reduces the mass and scale. So it encourages a configuration on the site so that essentially from the street side, you would have houses or you have buildings that had an appearance from the street side that would be similar in scale to what we see in the neighborhood. So I actually set the dimensions, the building widths and so forth, so that it would be similar facing the street as like a traditional 4-square type of building. So just a couple of things. We talked about bedrooms, 48 bedrooms, but we didn't talk about tenants. So I'm sure you're aware that a bedroom can be licensed for more than 2. So you ought to clarify, is this 48 residents or 48 bedrooms? Because you could really be looking at 96 residents. And within the parking, my guess is it's 48 residents. So Matt or Brian can clarify that. To me, this looks like a 4-story building. There is no definition of story that I can see in the zoning ordinance. Under the building code, as an architect, I'm sure I could make this meet the definition of 3 stories, but to me it looks like a 4-story building. It's 4 stories on the western and 3 stories on the east. To me, the 3-story facade on the east is too big, too massive. It just looks overwhelming compared to everything else. This literally, will be next to buildings because there's also a slope there. It's going to be sitting on the top of the hill, and it's going to be really prominent. So, if you were inclined, I know this is conceptual, but it's almost unfair to submit a conceptual plan and say, don't pay any attention to this conceptual plan, yet rely on it in order to get the zoning revision. Absolutely, there's no basis for doing anything other than what if you're going to hold to the master plan, it specifically says analogous uses are RM8 and RM14. It never mentions RM32 for these properties. And the RM32 that surrounds it, most of it was shown is along Abbott. It's not really on this street. So I think if you're inclined to approve anything, I don't see how you could possibly go past RM14, which is specifically referenced in the master plan. A couple other points here. How much time do I have left?
About a minute and a half.
About a minute, okay. You're currently under a process of developing the master plan. I'm hoping that the map will be reconsidered. So I'm not sure if that's going to happen. It sounds like you'll make a decision on whether the map will be revised. I know the residents clearly thought that what you meant by a master plan revision was that the map might be revised. Is that yours or mine?
It's yours.
Oh, okay. You can shut it off.
Phone call.
I think it's an alarm or something.
It's a phone call.
A phone call? Okay. I'll take it later.
That's funny.
Anyway, so you're in the process. You're going to have something within the next year. Why not wait? Consider this R4 element. I submitted it last October with the idea that it could be vetted, either adopted, rejected, amended, whatever, in time so that when you had the new master plan, there would be something in place you could cite for not just these properties, but similar transitional properties. But to me, you're in the process. Why push it? You know, the units are occupied apparently, so I'm not sure that any particular delay is that concerned. There is nothing in this site plan that implies that there's any intent to do any type of stormwater management. You know, as an architect, every single community I work in, we're required to manage our water on site. I don't see that there's enough space here for any detention or retention or specific plan. You know, you can't use the parking lot as detention or you'll have what would happen at the quarters where you have that water that builds up in the parking lot. So this plan is too much coverage, too much stormwater because of the layout. A smaller development, a little more sensitive development, you know, maybe so, but I think RM32 is a leap too far. Lastly, I went to the one meeting that I could see that was addressing housing in the comprehensive master plan process. That was on September the 30th. And you had the little map where the citizens put where they want to see new housing. There was one blue push pin which represented multifamily in this area. And it was actually on the library site, so it was misplaced. All of the rest were single-family duplexes. If you look at that, so we had that meeting, and there must be a purpose to that meeting, and hopefully somebody took a photograph of the map and took all the dots. I can tell you there are no multifamily dots on these parcels. The citizens have said, the one event you had where the citizens could weigh in on housing, they said not for these parcels, so I just leave you with that.
Hey, quick question, because I know we've talked about this a lot.
Yeah, no, I know.
So you recommended RM14. Is that something you'd be comfortable with there?
No, I mean, I would prefer to see those as single family, but I don't know, I can't predict what you will do. I mean, you recommended RM32 last time, and City Council, I think, didn't accept that, so I have no idea what you're inclined to do. But if you're inclined to do something, I don't see how you can go beyond RM14. I mean, the reason to go to RM32 is you can put more units on it. You can't build this development in RM14. So there must be some, I mean, you would have had some logic when you prepared the master plan last time. And so, I mean, they could have easily said analogous to RM32, but it doesn't.
Okay.
Yep, thank you.
Understood. Thank you. One more card here. Would the applicant like to address the bedroom versus tenant issue?
Matt Hagan, Hagan Realty. Yes, it's 48 bedrooms with 48 people. So that is our intention.
Okay.
As far as the building and the scope and I know we're not getting into the details of that, but since he says it's a 4-story building, I'll just clarify. So the orange is essentially grade. Those units that he's saying, it makes it look like a 4-story. Those are not going to be seen from the street. That's below grade. So it's a 3-story building from the street side. We intentionally left the N2 lower so that the building gradually went down so it didn't look like some large structure like he's worried about. So it's intentionally designed to give it a smaller appeal from the street side. As far as stormwater goes, any development that goes through East Lansing has to go through Public Works. The stormwater is handled as part of the site plan approval process. So it's not just me putting it on paper and saying, yep, it's going to work and that's the end of it and good luck with it. It has to go through Public Works. All the stormwater has to be handled, and that's addressed through the site plan process with the staff. So while I understand that we had a 1,000-year storm and everybody's flooded, my street included, my basement, my brother's basement, everybody's basement in the city flooded. I don't think that we should be punished because we had a 1,000-year storm a couple months ago, and this is all of a sudden going to add to that problem in that area. So stormwater will be handled as part of the development process. As far as the need for this development and where it should go, there is not a better spot, quite frankly, that exists. Okay, this is bookend by a sorority and fraternity, backed up by a business on a major, next to a major street. So
this is the prime spot for this type of redevelopment. There is a need for this type of development. There's students sitting here that have a very difficult time finding housing, okay? We're the last large company to make our houses available to the students this past renting season, okay? We rented 207 houses in a week. We rented 90 houses in a day. And we had a backup list, pages long, of people that didn't get a place. So the demand is there. These guys will tell you that the demand is there. They're not able to find the housing that they want, the quality that they want. So this is needed. This is a great location for it. And we will handle the storm runoff accordingly with the staff as part of the development process. Thank you.
Thank you for the clarifications. Lisa?
Good evening. I'm Lisa Hominick. I live at 222 Ridge Road, next to Mark. I don't know where to begin. I agree with 99.9% of what has been said by Tim and Deborah about the rezoning. I still am against the rezoning because, and thank you, Chair Sullivan, for your question about the size. 40 units is too big. It's too big for that area. Townhouses, whatnot, something much smaller. RM32 opens it up. I'm not saying you're going to do that because you've said you're not. I agree with you. But I think adding 40 more cars, a parking lot, okay, you have resident parking in the back. When they have visitors, they're parking on the street. And as you know, Ridge Road is the dead end. We are the overflow. We are the overflow for the fraternity, the sororities, both sororities. I've lived in my house for 34 years. I've seen the houses go from single family to demolished and turned into sorority. I've seen the church turn into a sorority, which was fine. They outgrew their building. What are you going to do? Okay. I just think density is a hard word. There's density in the right place, and I don't think the density that we're talking here is the appropriate place for it. We're dealing with cars, we're dealing with traffic, we're dealing with young kids. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Does anybody else wish to step forward on this agenda item? All right, seeing none. Is there anybody online in the queue for this item?
No one on the queue.
Okay, at this point, we will close the public hearing. Oh, sorry, Vice Chair.
I'm sorry. You can close the public hearing.
Okay.
I have a question for Landon.
At this point, we'll close the public hearing, and we shall see this presumably at our next meeting, which is October 23rd. All right, Vice Chair.
Landon, can I ask you a question? Can you tell me the difference in numbers of people between R14, R22, and R30, or RM14, RM22, and RM32? I guess low, medium, high density, but what does that mean in terms of?
Generally, the difference in zone district would be by number of dwelling units on property, and that would be by minimum lot size. It's going to take me a while, but I can calculate that. It probably won't be.
Well, it's okay. We can wait
think
till our discussion again. I
we
was just
can
sort
add it
of
to the
wondering
next
if we're to offer an alternative. I mean, like.
I requested that info for the next meeting
Oh,
too.
okay.
Anyway, so if we could get that, I think it'd be very helpful to kind of see those comparisons side by side. So that concludes this agenda item. Thank you, everyone. That brings us on to Item 6.2, a public hearing for ordinance 1539, a request from Gunovid, is that how you pronounce it? Gunovid LLC to rezone a vacant parcel immediately adjacent to it to be combined with 16647 Chandler Road from D to OIP to facilitate the construction of a fabrication shop, a special use within the OIP zone district. Mr. Bartley?
Thank you. I'm having a momentary technical difficulty. Just 1 second. Okay.
We can stall and talk about RM14 and RM22 if you want.
I think I can pull this up much faster now. So this request, as you mentioned, the ordinance 1539 is the request to rezone a vacant parcel. This is on the east side of Chandler, north of Lake Lansing, and its current zoning is D, Bath Township Development. This was transferred as part of a 425 agreement from Bath Township in July 2002, and at the time the zoning was not changed to a comparable East Lansing zone district. So the applicant currently has the property just to the south and east, 16647 Chandler, which I'm highlighting with my mouse on the screen. And their intent is to rezone the subject parcel, the sort of remainder parcel that you can see closest to Chandler at the northwest corner there from that Bath Township Development District to OIP, the Office Industrial Park District, which is the East Lansing zone district, and the zoning of the parcel, the larger parcel, 16647 Chandler. So the applicant, if this zoning approval, if this rezoning is approved, the applicant would then combine the two parcels, have a 10-acre OIP zoned parcel, and then would seek to construct a fabrication shop on that parcel. I'll also mention, I guess, and I'm happy to go into this in some detail now, although we can take the public hearing separately or together if you'd like. The sort of tie-barred request here is a special use request that, if approved, would be contingent upon the rezoning being approved. But that special use request is to construct a fabrication shop on the newly combined and rezoned parcel. So I do have much information about that because we're bringing the special use forward on this case tonight. But I'm happy to stop and talk about just the rezoning at this point, if there are any questions.
You know, I think because we're not taking a vote on it, it's fine to talk about both
Okay.
at the same time.
I'm going to have my technical issue again. Let me pull up the site plan real quick. So if approved for the rezoning, like I mentioned, the applicant would seek to, sorry, there we go. Okay. There we go. So what I've just pulled up on the screen is the proposed site plan that shows some of the proposed, I guess, the site improvements that the applicant would seek to do on this property. So again, contingent upon the rezoning. Essentially, right now we have including the property under consideration for rezoning, the applicant would combine the two parcels. We'd have a total of a 10-acre parcel, and the applicant proposes to construct a single-story, 21,000 square foot building, 16,800 square feet of fabrication shop. That would be sort of towards the rear of the building, 24 feet in height, and a 3,900 square foot office addition or office section, 12 feet in height, toward the front of the building. They would have about 1.25 acres of a gravel laydown yard to the north and east of the building, and then you can see the wetland is delineated with a 10-foot required setback from that wetland. There were some questions when I talked to our DPW staff about this proposal to make sure that the wetland delineation that the applicant provided is the same as what the city has on file. But after some review today, they believe that it is. There could be some questions, though, regarding that. One other thing about the utilities here is that because of the 425 transfer, the utilities on this site actually aren't serviced by the city of East Lansing, so there would need to be a interagency agreement in order to make sure that the utilities, the service can be provided to the site, which could provide some complications or delays to the process. In general, this proposal meets the requirements of the zoning ordinance for the site layout. Except for the number of parking spaces, the applicant proposes 24 parking spaces. The strict reading of the ordinance would require 53 parking spaces, but that's essentially far over what we expect is needed, because this is considered an unspecified non-residential use. And an unspecified non-residential use requires 300 square feet, or excuse me, one parking space per 300 square feet of gross floor area, which would require those then 53 parking spaces. However, understanding the nature of the use, 24 parking spaces would more than accommodate the need for parking, the actual need for parking on site, particularly because the applicant expects, I believe, 12 people as a maximum building occupancy at any given time. There has been significant grading proposed around the site. There's a large drainage swale to the north of the property, or north of the, excuse me, this would be a stormwater detention pond to the north of the parking lot with a stone channel draining from the parking lot into about a 4-foot deep stormwater detention pond. Also, the applicant has proposed a landscape berm in front of the laydown yard, about 2 feet tall, and then several stormwater detention swales around the laydown yard, especially to the north and to the east sides, as something of a buffer from the wetland further back in the property. Beyond that, I think that, this is a fairly straightforward plan. The applicant proposes a fabrication shop, which is a special use in the OIP zone district. Their plan essentially meets the requirements of the zoning ordinance. I'd be happy to answer any questions about anything you see on the site plan tonight or the rezoning request.
Thank you for the overview. Any questions? I have a few. They're probably better addressed for the applicant, but so unless you have any history of the flooding on the site and some of the impacts there, I think that's going to be a recurring question for many applications. Then just reminded me of just kind of a larger overall conversation of other 425 agreement parcels. I think there's some with DeWitt and Bath and Meridian, even over by the Costco. So.
To that point, I guess I can just speak real quick. We have identified about 54, 56 parcels that haven't been changed in zoning from the township zoning, but we haven't proposed those to yet come forward as a package, in part because we're not proposing any major zoning map changes while the comprehensive plan update is in process. As far as flooding, I don't have that information, although the applicant did submit a 2021 baseline environmental assessment. The major takeaways from that document were more that there's several areas of contamination on the property. At some point, this was back in the 1960s and 70s. It was used for dumping by the city of Lansing. Later on, in around 2000, this was used for production of corn-based runway de-icer, and we believe that stopped activities several years ago. The building was demolished in 2021, but I don't have access or current information about flooding. I can find that out for you. The applicant does propose to remove several trees from the property, which require tree removal or a land clearing permit or both to accommodate the proposed construction.
you answered one of my questions. So what's on the site now is basically nothing. It's been, I was trying to look at the Google Street View and,
Yeah, there's a trailer on site right now and a small shed at the
Okay.
far south border of the property. I should mention that the surrounding land uses are residential to the north and south, a large agricultural area to the east, and then across the street is more Bath Township zoning.
it's an interesting OIP zoning, I guess you said it's a non-conforming use, so why wasn't something like C3, is there no other zoning that would be appropriate there for their use?
There is a manufacturing district that could be contemplated. The applicant's current zoning for the larger property is OIP, so
Okay.
their intent was just to rezone the smaller properties to match that so that it could be combined.
Okay. Thank you. Is there any other questions? Okay. I think we're ready for the applicant to come up and address the commission if they're here. Thank you.
My name is Jerry Gunthorpe. I am the applicant. I'm the president of Gunthorpe Plumbing and Heating. We first worked in the city of East Lansing in 2000. We were just up the road here. Our main office was at 909 Abbott Road. We rented from the ball lines for 10 years. We outgrew that location and we moved up just north of this parcel on Hunsaker. So our main headquarter office is located just on Hunsaker. Right now we rent a prefabrication shop on Pine Tree Road, South Lansing. The main use of our fab shop that we have now is for pre-manufacturing of our computer modeled buildings that we do remodels and new construction. So the industry has changed so much in the recent years of being LEED certified for cleanliness, trash, recycling, and all the different aspects that go into construction, that we've adopted a lot of those new processes for delivering job sites. So what the fabrication shop would be used for is after we're done modeling and creating a computer model of any structure that we work in, we can scan buildings, we can model from new engineered building design. So projects that we work on now are a lot of, like at Michigan State, we'll in the summertime have dorms that are outdated, galvanized piping that we have to update to new materials. We can model that in computer, which is the lengths of pipe with fittings and all that stuff. That would be a joining method for that material. We ship it to our fab shop and we pre-make everything.
Oh, wow.
So what that does is it saves time on the job site. So the short schedule of summertime on campus, when you have students leave in May, back in late August, we can basically gut a building and replace the piping and already have it modeled before the students even leave, pre-manufacture the pipe and get on site running right away. So it saves costs, it saves material, it saves all that labor costs in the field. So that's just one aspect of it. So this building, what we did is Diane Holman was the occupant of this building. She had working bugs in there. She was the last owner with Spartan Technology. She does Red Cedar Spirits. And she obviously went to mill it, so she went to the new location, and I purchased the property from her just for the fact of having a fab shop closer to our main office on Hunsaker. And so we've designed the building to keep it away from the apartments for noise. Almost all of our work is going to be inside the building. It'll be enclosed, so nobody will see what materials we're bringing in and out. It's not a lot of trucks coming in and out, so a lot of, like I said, when it's 12 employees, that's about what it would take to do what we do for prefab now. We've never had 12 in the fab shop that we have, but we keep growing, and I'm never going to say we're going to stop growing. But this building is sized for what we need for delivering the materials, and 12 would be at most what would ever be in there at one time. So the parking spots, the office space is for BIM modelers, drawers, project managers that we can bring guys in, manufacture the items, and then ship it to the job site and save all those lean delivery methods, what everybody's going to now, and this really helps in our qualifications for that process. I've had the wetlands were delineated. You talk about flooding. This property is vacant land. From my experience, all the 1,000-year floods, this did not flood. We do have some runoff from Hunsaker from the other properties. Water does stand for a day and then it disappears even when we had all that rain. So it's all permeous ground right now. And I think it was an old farmland, so I even think some of the drain tiles there work still, so it's not a flooding issue at all. And so what we've designed in this is to maintain the wetlands. So when he's talking about those swales around the outside, we also have outflows of those that still run off from our yard, will run off, and at a certain percentage will still feed the wetlands to maintain that. Because I know East Lansing has an ordinance, obviously, for no loss wetlands. And we're not going to impact the wetlands at all. The only wetland that we're going to have to deal with is the county drain. The county drain is considered a wetland. And we're going to have to take our overflow from our pond into the drainage ditch for any, major runoff that would ever happen that would come off either the parking lot or the land and go into there. But it's all filtered, it's all controlled, and there's no risk of contamination. And I know Landon did discuss about the BEA we had. I had an assessment when I bought the property. It was used as a dump. That's at the way at the back of the property. Hunsaker was a gravel drive at one time, and they drove to the back and they dumped in the back of the property, and there is some contamination back there. It's mainly for drinking water, but the water on the site is board water, so there's no well that would be put on the site that would have that contamination. So drinking water, it does sound like there is some issues with that, but that's not going to be an issue with the building. So the reason it's there is the reason we're close to MSU. We do a lot of work. I know Mark probably knows that when we moved into East Lansing at 909, we were required at the time to service East Lansing customers. And that was the requirement, have a mechanical contractor in town, and that's what we did. And to this day, we still service all the East Lansing customers' residential needs, even though we're not really a residential service contractor. But we still do that to this day. But the major customer that we have that we do a lot of our lean methods with is with Michigan State, and they're a great partner with us. So being close to campus is a priority for us. And this location is right on the northern edge, obviously, of the city, because right to the north, the first property, that's Bath Township still. That was not annexed. So, and the services, I think the storm does go that way. So the sewer and storm goes that way. So the bills would go to Bath for that. The water comes from the board, and then the gas is consumers and electrical. So,
That's a great description.
Yeah, it's really,
Yeah, thank
really
you
good
for the
background.
description.
yeah, so if you have any questions, I can answer.
Yeah, that's great.
Any questions from commissioners? So you're doing drain lines and supply lines? Is it PVC, PEX? Are you doing copper?
See, it's the occupancy is very low, so we're only putting 4 restrooms in, so that would be copper.
Okay.
If
No, I'm
you're-
talking
if you
about
look
what
at-
you're fabricating.
Oh, for fabricating.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so FRIB, the facility for rare isotope
Yeah.
beams. We've been there since 2014. We were a partner with Limbach, who's a large mechanical contractor. They're a publicly traded company now, but we did half the construction of the FRIB. So we did all the process cooling and all of the HVAC work on that building, on the construction. And now since we've been working with the scientists on all the experiments. So we're still in the FRIB. And what we do over there is I have some of the most highly skilled stainless welders in the area, and they do all the cryogen work, which is compressed helium. So we learned a lot of lessons on pre-manufacturing for the FRIB during the construction of that project. So if you take a look at working in the FRIB, when they do a short shutdown because of the experiments they're doing, either it's down in the beam line or in the target hall or wherever, we have to get in and get out during their shutdown. We have a computer model of the entire building, and scientists are always in there changing and updating their methods and their uses and redundancy. So there's a lot of cryogen that we manufacture and install. Cooling we make redundant and install. So it's a continuing process that we have to pre-manufacture the stuff, assemble it, take it to the job site, and install in a short period of time. That's where we really learned our processes the most when we did the FRIB. So, and to this day, we're still there. I still have 10 guys on campus at the FRIB working day in, day out, right with the scientists. So that's a pre-manufactured, so it's from stainless welding to copper pipe install to steam, like a welded black cast iron system, or any other joining method for any other system. So like the state lab is putting in a 290,000 square foot lab in Diamonddale. We're doing all the plumbing on that starting this week. And I'm gonna have on site at one point probably 60 guys doing the plumbing on that building. That building is pre-manufactured gases that you would ever have in a lab building. So you're dealing with argon, nitrogen, oxygen, medical systems, and they're going to have the Eagle's going to be in there, and there's also going to be Department of Human and Health Services are going to be in that building also. And it's a really intense lab facility. So all of our materials, even the underground. So if you're going to take that building it's about 100,000 square foot slab on grade. We're pre-manufacturing all the sanitary underground prior to the building going in. So we're making that in our fab shop in Pine Tree, hauling it over and installing to save the time of it takes to excavate and install even the sanitary. So we're pre-manufacturing sanitary in our fab shop on Pine Tree right now.
So this location will put you a lot closer to where you need to.
It's
get
close
your-
to the
yeah.
office. It's close to our corporate workings of the modeling, the BIM guys, the project managers. So it's a lot closer location. Pine Tree's a great location. It's not a bad spot, but it's obviously it's on the south side of town. So
Yeah. Well, I think you answered just about all my questions. The only one I had was in our staff report, it was noted that, and I think you touched on this a bit, that all the work you're going to be doing is enclosed and that
it's
there'd
inside
be-
the building, yes.
Okay, there'd be no impact to noise or odor.
Well, that's why
any-
that's why the L-shaped separates us from any apartments that are in the location, and there's going to be no trees touched behind. I think it's like 300 foot from the road, and the property is 1,300 feet deep or so. So there's a lot of property behind that the trees will stay.
Okay.
So there's a buffer between some of the apartments that wrap around and the ones to the south. We stayed off of that side of the building, so all the trees are going to stay along that side too. Plus the building's 24 foot tall, so any noise coming from the yard is not going to be going towards the apartments. There's gonna be no lights on that side, no egresses on that side. It's going to be separated from one, and they'll just see the trees anyways between that and the building that they see now.
Yeah, there's not even a ton of windows on the site plan. Really, it's just the office component.
Yeah, it's considered a future office. The way I wanted to have it set up now is it's going to be the offices for our project managers that are going to be working on the material procurement, meaning you order material, they bring it in, we assemble, and then we ship it back out to the job site.
And then
So-
I don't know if I saw it in the packet here, but having worked with PVC and it can be pretty smelly sometimes. So you have equipment there that handles.
Well, it's PVC's the probably the most smelly side
The glue,
would be
yeah.
the welding. The stainless welding is no smell when you weld stainless. There's no smell. Carbon steel, there is a burnt smell to it. But any of our exhaust fans are on the north side of the building.
But you have
And-
exhaust fans and equipment to handle.
Yes,
Yeah,
infiltration. Yes, exactly.
I thought so. I
right.
just
Yep.
wanted to confirm.
Yep. Yep.
Okay. Any remaining questions? Okay. None from us. That was really helpful background.
Yeah, no problem.
Appreciate you coming in.
Thank you.
So I'm going to open and close two separate public hearings, Landon, just to be safe. So at this point, we'll open the public hearing for item 6.2. Is there anybody that wishes to come forward and address this application?
And that's the rezoning.
The rezoning, the application, item 6.2, yep. All right, seeing none. Anyone online in the queue?
No one in the queue.
All right, at this point, we can close the public hearing and then move on to item 6.3, which was already discussed with item 6.2, the rezoning. This is the actual special use request. Is there, I can open the public hearing. Is there any members that wish to come forward and address the commission? Seeing none, anyone online in the queue?
No one in the queue.
All right, we can close the public hearing. Just making sure we do that properly. So that takes us on to, presumably we'll see this at the next planning commission meeting, which is October 23rd. So thank you, and we'll see you then. That takes us on to item number 6.4, a public hearing for a site plan request by Timber Sauna Company to install a seasonal sauna park in the vacant lot at 270 West Grand River Avenue. Mr. Bartley?
Yes. Thank you. This is this property is located on the north side of Grand River Avenue and just east of Delta Street, or I should say the northeast corner of that intersection. This is just south of Valley Court Park, and I have it pulled up on the aerial. Or you may know that Crunchy's Bar, and this is immediately west of Crunchy's. The zoning of this parcel is B2, which is retail sales business, consistent with the properties to the east and west. Across the street, across Grand River, you have also a B1, a lower intensity district, and then to the north is community for the Valley Court Park. The applicant is proposing a seasonal sauna park. And let me just scroll down real quick. Here we go. So the proposed sauna park is about 2,700 square feet in size, about 30 feet by 90 feet. It was enclosed to be enclosed by a 4-foot wooden privacy fence, and the ground would be covered by cedar decking, turf, and heated rubber walkway mats. So the applicant proposes several temporary sauna trailers. This would be 2 saunas. One would be an 8x8 electric unit and one 8x20 wood fire unit. Also proposes a check-in yurt, which is this round conical structure that would be for the check-in area and changing area. 2 cold plunges, about 4 feet by 4 feet, and a restroom trailer and a storage shed. And if approved, the applicant hopes to also install one more 8x10 ADA accessible sauna unit next January. Their intent would be to open, again, this seasonal use as soon as November if approved, and would continue that use through to April. Oh, and I should mention that they would provide outdoor propane-fueled heaters and a fire pit near a seating area for patrons. They estimate up to about 100 customers a day, with busier days being on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. For lighting, they propose string lights and decorative sconces on the structures. But importantly, none of these structures are permanent. This is again a temporary seasonal use. Because of its sort of impermanent nature, and I guess we don't really have a precedent for this in the city. The applicant does operate similar parks as close as Rockford, Michigan, but also in Florida, Massachusetts, Washington, and Wisconsin. Because of the seasonal nature, the applicant is asking for, if the Planning Commission is amenable, for a vote this evening so that it could be forwarded to City Council. This is a site plan request, and the Planning Commission makes a recommendation on site plan review for council, who then reviews it without a public hearing. And that could be added if a vote were taken tonight on a recommendation, that we could potentially get it on the City Council's agenda for next Tuesday. Otherwise, the applicant would go to the City Council on November 19th, and their hope was to open this sauna park by Thanksgiving if possible. So for that to be possible, they are asking the Planning Commission to take a vote this evening, and that's we have a sample motion for you at the end of the packet. I should also mention that because this is relatively unprecedented, at least in the city, our ordinance doesn't really define what this is. So we went back and forth and figured out that this is the closest comparable use would be a personal services use, which in the B2 zone district requires site plan review, but not a special use permit. So that's why we're bringing this before you today for site plan review, which requires this public hearing tonight, a recommendation to council, and then a vote by council. As far as the location on the site, the entire property at 270 West Grand River is just under half an acre. This use is 2,700 square feet, so it comprises about 15% of the total site area. It'd be the southwest corner of the site, closest to the intersection. The applicant doesn't propose it to be right up against the corner, but set back a couple of feet, and that would keep it out of the clear vision area that's required between Grand River and Delta Street. Oh, I should mention that finally they proposed some potted plants, potted trees within the site, but are also amenable to introducing some outside of the site to act as street trees. And if that were to be the case, we just require that those would be in compliance with our urban design guidelines, which govern downtown. Beyond that, I think I've covered it. Does anyone have any questions for me before we invite the applicant up?
I had a few quick ones, but I'll.
Yes.
So essentially what we're looking at is a temporary approval, and they're proposing for this to be done April of 2025. It's such a unique thing. Like, I guess that's my first question. So what would be the process to renew that? Would it automatically end April of 2025? Is this sort of a temporary approval, or is that a permanent approval of the site? Could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, it would be a land use approval. Based on the application and testimony, they say this will end in April 2025, so you could condition your approval on that ending.
Okay.
And then when land use is abandoned, the land use rights would be gone.
But that's not currently in the motion that's in the agenda.
That's not currently in
Okay.
the motion, but it could be added.
So then we would have to, if we added that as a condition, then we would have to basically review another application at that time to extend it. It would automatically cease at that time. We would have to
That's
put essentially an
correct.
end date on the approval.
Yeah.
Okay. And then you touched on it a little bit, but you know, the fence doesn't look like it's a permanent structure, so I don't know if the city's fence guidelines still apply. I was a little concerned of someone driving south there and trying to make a left-hand turn and having some visibility issues with the road. You touched on that, though. It sounds like you brought it up to the applicant. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so the fencing, we haven't discussed the details of how the fencing would be installed. It would have to be sturdy and essentially act as a permanent fence. To the question of clear vision, well, number one, I should say the fence is proposed to be 4 feet in height. Still, that's over the allowed height within a clear vision area. The clear vision triangle is a 40-foot right triangle, so 40 feet on each side. And then hypotenuse, you can't have anything within that triangle that can exceed 3 feet. So this would have to be set back slightly.
Okay.
However, because of the width of Grand River Avenue, there's very little of the clear vision triangle that actually extends onto the property.
Okay. What about parking and signage? So is there any signage that's planned for? I don't see it on the application. And then parking, would they just use public parking?
Yeah. So this was also a difficult calculation to make because this use isn't a temporary personal services use in the code isn't included. When we talked to the applicant about their expected number of people, including up to about 100 a day, they can accommodate that parking need on the site with shared parking that would be leased from DTN, the owner of the property, but they could also use additional parking within the city system. So nearby parking lots or parking spaces along Valley Court or even the garages downtown.
Okay. Is there one exit? I'm seeing only one exit on it.
Yes.
One entrance, one exit.
Yes, the proposed exit or the little gate that's shown, it would be on the east side, sort of between the sauna park and Crunchies.
Is that? I can't even say this is typical because it's such a unique application,
Yeah.
but it sees like that could potentially be, something we could
We have
look at.
sent this to the police and fire for their
Okay.
concerns. They've been looking at it. And they had a question. They were asking about drainage, specifically about what to do about draining the cold plunges or the restroom trailer, if that would be done like a porta-john, what the plans were for that. And then also suggested that where the fire elements are proposed, they would need to have approval by the fire department. They didn't mention anything so far about the location of the exit or whether or not additional exits would be needed.
Okay. Councilman Meadows, were you going to say something?
No, I was just voicing that this is the Bigby property, so
Yeah.
there's an existing curb cut.
Oh no, I meant for the fence to get in and out of the actual fencing. So, okay, and then no alcohol is permitted.
That's
then?
correct.
Okay.
No alcohol is proposed.
Just wanted to be clear. And then most of the other questions I have are kind of about the business model. So I will let the applicant come up unless there's any remaining questions.
This is
Commissioner Lepine?
Sorry, this is a small thing, but obviously if they're done in April of 2025, but they've added in some trees and shrubs, are they responsible for taking those with them? I mean, what does that process look like, or are they leaving potted plants?
Yeah, these would all be potted. So they would be removed with land use when that's
Okay.
removed.
And then, we don't have any other applications for this site, do we? So essentially, we're considering either this or kind of the, I don't know, whatever's there now. the
Vacant-
concrete.
vacant
So I
lot
can't
that's
imagine
partially
there's-
used for parking.
There's any flooding or water impact to the site unless somebody were to dump over all the cold tubs at once or something, so.
I'm not aware of any flooding issues. When I talked to
Yeah.
DPW about it, they didn't express any concerns.
It's all concrete, so I don't know. That wouldn't change, is my
Correct.
understanding. Okay, is the applicant ready to come up and, you can come up together, that works.
Nice to meet you all. I'm Dan Downs, the president of Timber Sauna Company, and my brother Joel Downs is here. He's the founder of Timber Sauna Company. We started timber a couple of years ago after a lifelong of sauning up in the UP at our grandparents' farm. So we've built dozens and dozens of saunas, in particular for businesses across the country, opening up such villages and brick and mortar sauna experiences like the one proposed this evening. What we've learned through building these, not only is sauna good for you and good for us, but that it opens up a new experience for people, not only socially, but with their health, to engage in an activity that's all-encompassing for the mind and the body. And so we're super excited about offering something to the community here in East Lansing that would open up a new avenue of activity throughout the day. We propose the hours of operation between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. So that provides time for people in the morning and people throughout the afternoon and the evening to partake in public sauna and cold plunge. That being said, with the temporary nature kind of request for this property, we thought, hey, this is kind of a trial run, and what we want to do is prove to the community that this is something that not only that they would be open to doing, but that they would want to do again and again. And we would seek, after April, to keep it even open over the summer. I know that probably your colder months or your busier months for sauna and cold plunge, but we'd be open to keeping it there and then maybe making more permanent plans for the site if it was successful. And there was great community response for the site there. The idea started just driving by. We're from about 30 minutes outside of East Lansing, but grew up driving through. Our grandpa was a junk professor here at Michigan State, so we're not strangers to the community. But just driving through, we noticed this lot, been to the Bigby many times when it was there. And after, in particular, we opened up, or helped open up a spot in downtown Boston at the Greenway, which is a nonprofit conservatory there in downtown Boston where the Archway is. And the feedback from the greater Boston community was so positive. You imagine this sprawling urban environment. It's kind of this concrete jungle, and you have this oasis in the middle of the city where people can go check in, take a sauna. Their phone's in the locker room. They're not, engaging with technology. Heating up for about 15 minutes, cooling down, whether it's just being outside, using the cold plunge, talking with friends, and then repeating that around 3 times. And the feedback was so good. After driving by this lot, to kind of bring the story around, we thought, hey, this is a great kind of vacant spot here in the middle of the city. Not in the middle, but kind of on the edge of it, that would work great for this. And so we started our inroads into asking for permissions, and then here we are today. So with that, there are specific questions I know you guys have regarding the whole operation. So I'll answer those now, and if you want to talk to Joel as well, he's available here.
Okay, thank you for the overview. Questions?
So
Commissioner Overby?
I'm interested in your business model. Where else have you done this, and how successful has it been, and what has been your experience in other locations where you've done this?
So
Have you done it in other locations?
Yeah, so we are a builder primarily. We build, manufacture saunas, Lake Lansing Road, just kind of by Eastwood Town Center, by Consumers Concrete. So what we've done is build the saunas and consult for our clients that operate these businesses across the country. So I'm going to clarify that. And what we've learned through them is that obviously it takes time to get attention and to get people aware of what it is and what it isn't, because there's a lot of people that maybe haven't gone to Norway or Finland and experienced something like this. But here in the US, it's gaining steam, no pun intended, with sauna experiences, not obviously just built by us, but by all the other sauna companies across the United States. And they're easily researched by just Google searches, just typing in public sauna experiences. There's a lot of press about them right now. And not only their social good, but just in the general topic, whether you're looking for a personal sauna or you're looking to attend a public sauna. So other things that we've learned is that the importance of inclusion, not only with ADA, but making sure people understand that it's for everybody. So you could be young, you could be old. You may not have tried a cold plunge and been to the back and used their saunas, like many folks have here in this area. But they really are for everybody. And then when people learn that, they get really excited about going back and trying it again. You think of your evening activities, your options, I guess, as being, at least in this community, and I can't speak for all of them, but going to the pub, going to the bar, going to a Michigan State game, going to a friend's house, you can name the activities. There's not a ton of healthy things to do other than going to the gym that are also social, right? And what Timber, Fire, and Ice would be is this social engagement with something that's good for you, your mind and your body. And that's really what we've learned through all these experiences. We built a sauna barge. We're building a second one that's going to Seattle. And it's right on the water at Lake Washington. So people sauna in this barge. It's moored and docked to a pier. And so they heat up in this thing, there's big windows. They're kind of seeing the harbor, and then they jump in Lake Washington, and then they get out and they do it probably like three, 4 times within an hour and 15 minutes. And just the transformation that people have gone through within their own minds, their own bodies by doing something hard, like going in a 180-degree sauna and then 42-degree water. That experience in particular has really helped us understand the need for something like this. And the access for something like this for folks that don't have maybe the desire or the social fortitude to go to a gym or go to an experience that is maybe less social. So hope that answers the question.
I have two maybe more technical questions. So obviously you have the cold plunges. How do you intend to kind of maintain those? I mean, I'm assuming there's a health and safety aspect to that of changing the water and doing things of that nature in between clients. Can you walk me through that process?
Yes, the cold plunges, they're going to be ozone filtered, and they're going to be filtered through a filtration system outside of the ozone. With that, there's water tests that are done to maintain the correct alkaline and water sanitation properties that are needed for public use, and we'll be abiding by those guidelines to make sure that the water's safe and not murky to get into. I guess the public cold plunges can be difficult if you have a smaller volume of water and a lot of people going through it. It's a body mass to water ratio. So these plunges are 200 gallons each, so it's more water volume than a typical personal cold plunge. So that helps with the water to body ratio. So outside of changing filters and testing the water and changing the water, we're open to suggestions and obviously the health department's recommendations on maintaining it. And the water will be pumped out via a pump truck, and then fresh water will be pumped back in, so we won't be draining it out onto the ground. It'll be pumped out and pumped in.
Is that like a daily process, a weekly process?
Probably a weekly process. Okay. It'll depend on volume and water tests and cleanliness, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it's a great question because when you're sticking a lot of bodies through a cold plunge, it's got to be clean.
Yeah.
Just a follow-up to that. How many people would go into a cold plunge at once? Is it just one person?
1 to 2 per cold plunge,
Okay.
each, yeah, at any given time. So 4 total, probably. Depending on your ability to handle the cold water, usually it's like 30 seconds for
Right.
a lot of folks, but if you're a seasoned cold plunger, it could be up to 2 to 3 minutes.
And how would you stop them from freezing over in January?
So the water is going to be pumped and maintained. So
Oh, okay.
as long as it's moving, the pump system is going to be in a compartment that's going to be heated. So the water is constantly filtered and sanitized, even during off hours.
Can I know this is sort of beyond our purview, but this is kind of interesting. So it says there's heated mats, right? So I guess
Yep.
that's how you're going to stop, snow, snow would melt.
Yep.
What are you going to do with all the runoff from snow water? Where will it go and how will you?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the footprint where people are going to be, they're going to have access to, so the ground where they're going to be able to walk and use is going to be all covered in heated pads, which will be a combination of like turf that's over the heated pad or just heated pads as walkways. I'm not sure if you're aware of or maybe have used some of the heated pads, maybe at a vacation rental or whatever. But we have, and we're pretty familiar with how they work and their effectiveness for safety, access safety. The alternative is salt, right, or not using water at all. But inevitably, you're going to get snow that melts and then refreezes, and so you're going to want something that constantly maintains a safe walkway and environment. As far as water runoff, we'd have to work with the city to figure out what the rules are for water that's either dripping off bodies and is just falling down, and then washing protocols and cleaning protocols for the ground itself. So obviously if it's not going to freeze, we'd be washing and kind of maintaining a clean surface according to city guidelines.
Any other questions? So you talked a little bit about pumping out the water and replacing the water. What about the restroom trailer? Because that's not going to be connected to any city plumbing system, so that's going to be pumped out as well. It's sort of like a porta potty, but a much nicer version of.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's basically a bougie porta potty.
Got it.
Yeah, it'll get pumped out by a sanitation company as frequent as necessary, and yeah, potentially. And Mike at Crunches is a good friend as well. So
Okay.
I have
gonna
another.
ask if you talked to him about the proposal, because he's your closest
Yeah.
neighbor, and.
I have another business that services his restaurant, and have had a relationship with him for about 10 years. So we talked about it, and he was excited about it.
Okay.
And having a potential synergy in the future if this works out between Crunchies and this experience.
But to confirm, there's no alcohol on your site. It's not like somebody can buy a drink at Crunchies and walk over and.
Correct. There's no alcohol, and there'd be sobriety tests if we feel necessary for folks, especially students, if we feel it's necessary. That being said, we're open to a future where that's maybe even allowed, or there's a greater site plan developed that would allow for more social drinking. And but for this proposal, that's not included.
Okay, but not tonight.
And-
Yeah. Commissioner Levine?
Just tagging onto your question, I think it's evident in the drawings that are included in here, but the portable restrooms, that would be within the fence, so it would not be open for the general public that are
Correct.
just walking by. Okay.
Good point. And then help me understand this. So it said you're going to service about 100 customers a day. How many people are going to be in there at once?
Yeah, good question. So 100 people a day, we do about 8 sessions that are an hour and 15 minutes each. And so we'd kind of break that down. I guess 100 was our goal, is to
Yeah.
be able to get 100 people to be there a day. At any given time with that hour and 15, we're hoping to service around 15 people at a max, that hour and 15 sessions. Yeah, 15 to 20, but 15 would be our goal per hour and 15. So it's a very relaxed environment. We'll be open to private rental for the whole site if there's a business or community that wanted to go and rent the space out for 2 to 3 hours at a time. It's part of the business plan. The low-end cost is around $20 to attend, and then we'd offer a membership at $40 a month with unlimited use of the site. We hope to get a lot of students. We hope to get, obviously, any age, but to invite people into kind of this healthy hour and 15 throughout their week to de-stress from whatever work or school might be burdening them. So and it's not a place where you're going to have sauna parties and there's loud music and it's going to carry on until 2 in the morning. It'll be something that's maintained kind of a peaceful environment with the atmosphere of the trees and the beautiful cedar saunas that we build that will be there on site.
But you mentioned, college students, but this business model is not really college town specific, right? It's broader than that. I mean, looking at some of the other communities that were listed, they're not really, big college towns necessarily.
They're not necessarily college towns. The demographic of people that respond to these experiences are typically younger people between 18 and 45 years old. But there's certainly the whole age gamut that shows up and that's into it. So
There's plenty of Finnish culture where we see people 70, 80. We've saw it with our grandparents. So it really depends on location, and it's come one, come all. So.
Okay.
Do you
Commissioner Lapine?
do you have age parameters? Like, how would you handle kids under 18? Do you have concerns about anyone over 65 with a health condition? Like, how are you going to handle that?
So upon signing up, there's the age requirement rule, and then there's also a general sign-off for liability that states, if you're in bad health or if you, have X, Y, and Z condition, consult your doctor before attending. So that'll definitely be there for the sign-off and just general knowledge about what sauna is for and what it's not for, what cold plunge is for, what it's not for. So that'll all be in the sign-up process and in the FAQ on our site. There'll be signage posted as well. As an example, like if you feel sick and if you feel like your health isn't in good condition to attend, please either stay home if you're sick or consult your physician before attending something like this.
Which dovetails to my final question of, I'm assuming you have a liability insurance policy.
Correct.
Okay,
Yep.
so you have to get a coverage, that's a requirement of the business.
Yeah, upon this being approved, the insurance company will assess any requirements either from the city or DTN that owns the property, and then what we would think would be necessary for coverage as well.
But is there any, I guess that begs the question, is there any state licensure requirement for any of these types of facilities?
Not that we're aware of. no.
Okay.
No.
Understood. And then, I noted the potential concern because you're going to have, I don't know how your saunas are heated, but I'm assuming there'll be some flame or fire on site, and you only have one exit out of the fenced area. So I think,
Yeah.
I don't know if that's common or if typically there's a second one, but it could potentially be a problem.
Yeah, a second egress, I think, is going to be made. The original site plan is the first draft of the site. So the second draft has a second egress in it, so at least 2. But that's the fire department's job, I think, too, to determine the amount of people that would be in there, their occupancy number, and then how many egresses are needed for it. And then as far as fire safety, the saunas are built in accordance with stove manufacturer installation guidelines. And then there's obviously fire extinguishers there, and staff will be monitoring. I could speak with Boston there at Moki Sauna with the village that is there. The fire department was very involved, and the city had a special ordinance that required someone from the fire department to be there the whole time the saunas were burning, or the saunas were heated. And they never had an incident, and it was kind of a city ordinance that had to be followed, so to speak. But wood-fired, speaking of Norway and Oslo, Baston, where there's dozens of these, most of them are wood-fired, and people kind of prefer the traditional nature of wood-fired sauna. The electric is great too. It's obviously makes it easier on us, or it heats up. You could use your app to turn it on, but it's just a different experience. So the wood-fired kind of gives you that more visceral kind of sauna experience.
Is this wood or electric?
We have one electric unit that would be going there if approved, and then one wood-fired sauna that's larger.
Okay, thank you. Any remaining questions?
If you
Mr.
could
Bartley?
just, thank you. If you could just clarify briefly, I think when we talked before, you said your hours would be 7 a.m. to 8 p.m., but you just mentioned in your testimony 7 to 7?
7 to 7 is the new revised
Okay.
proposal for hours. And Landon, I'm not sure what approvals would be needed if we change the hours from your perspective, the city's perspective, but we'd love to have a discussion about that too.
Before us again, wouldn't it, if they wanted to change the hour?
Yeah, so I guess the planning commission or city council would, what they would approve as a condition, they would say per testimony. So if you say 7 to 7, your hours will be stuck to 7 to 7. If you say, we'd like to go potentially to X time, then you should request that.
Yeah, that's a good clarification and would be, yeah. So we would love to talk about the, either extending that or keeping it where
It's
it
a great
is.
time to talk about it.
Okay, okay, perfect. I guess a good question for you guys is if we said 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. and then drew that back, would we have to change and ask for permission to draw the hours back in the evening?
No. So if you said 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. and the planning commission and city council were amenable to that, you could operate to that time, and then if you were to bring that back, that would just be up to you, but you couldn't extend it forward.
I would say 10 p.m. would be our request then for the end of business hours.
Okay. The other question, I just want to clarify on drainage, you said that for the restrooms, you'll have those pumped out.
Yep.
It sounds like the other uses, such as a cold plunge or the saunas, would just be draining onto the ground?
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
The cold plunge will be pumped out.
The cold plunge will be pumped out, but so, yeah, you're dripping, you're in the
Okay.
sauna, and maybe you guys have had sauna before,
So sort
been
of
to sauna.
incidental drainage off of people.
Yeah, the people, and you throw water on the rocks, and there's some water that will spill down. So the
Okay.
saunas will drain a little bit of water, but it's
Very minimal.
yeah, it's not very much
And
at
in your
all.
other locations, have you had instances of heavy snow?
In Boston, yeah, and that's where the snow mitigation came into.
Okay. So I'm just, I guess I want to be clear that if we have a crazy 3-foot snow day in February,
Yeah.
how do you handle that on your side?
So proper, just site management, so shoveling the snow. The heated pads will be on at all times during those colder days. So it really diminishes the need for any snow removal outside or inside the area of occupancy. Now, outside of it, working with DTN to make sure that their snow plow is there, clearing the parking lot, and then we're shoveling and salting our entrances.
Yeah, okay. I guess the final question is that the 4-foot fences that surrounds the whole, so you propose to surround the whole park, is
Yep.
that consistent with your other locations? Is 4 feet typically the right size, or do you see lower or higher fences?
In Boston, they integrated the trees with the fences to kind of create a perimeter so people could come in and out, but there was different sizes. And so they had lower, like 3 feet, and then they had trees that were 8, 9. So I think it just is different for each city that we have helped set these up in and been a part of them, so.
So there's no standard across
Yeah.
the spectrum, yeah.
Thank you.
The idea is creating a space, this oasis within an urban environment. That's the idea. So if it needs to be amended that we change the height, and you mentioned 4 feet's a little bit above the maybe the view of sight or however the ordinance is, we'd be open to even lowering that to make it.
Okay.
Up
And
to
for what
code.
it's worth, I don't know that, I mean, you may not have an issue. When we looked at the clear vision triangle, it seems that you're probably outside of that.
Yep.
But I want to be understanding of what your needs are, I guess.
Yeah, so again, to reiterate, the idea is the fence still allows you to see in, so you can understand what the environment is. It's not this caged off thing. You're like, ooh, I wonder what's going on inside there. This is like, hey, I can see what's going on. This is really cool, and I'm invited in, but it's still somewhat private with the fence. And you don't have, like some of the more busy nights, you don't have random people kind of walking through where it invades on the environment that you're paying to use. So that's where the fence comes in.
Thank you.
Seeing no additional comments or questions, thank you for your overview and indulging us. Appreciate
Yep,
that.
thank you guys, appreciate it. Yep.
Thank you.
So what is the will of the commission?
And Mr. Chair, you should have a public hearing.
Oh, yeah, apologies. At this point, we'll open the public hearing. Is there any members of the public that wish to come forward and address this proposal? Seeing none. Anyone online?
There's no one in the queue.
All right, this point, we'll close the public hearing and determine what the will of the commission is regarding the applicant's request. I think that would require a motion to suspend the rules. which we could discuss.
If I could jump in, I
Commissioner
confess
Overby.
that I'm really struggling here. This is a vacant lot, so this would be a business on that vacant lot that doesn't seem to have lots of demand to do other things. But it feels to me like this is ad hoc, and there's lots of unanswered questions and lots of moving parts that we're being asked to approve without knowing the answer to those questions and all of those different moving parts. So that's what I'm struggling with, and I wonder what my peers are thinking.
Was there a particular component that you were still looking for more information on?
Well, we talk about health and safety and the fire department and having the proper egresses, and the fire department will wade in and tell us what's the right thing to do. And I'm sure they will.
Yeah.
But should we know that before we approve this? And should all of those questions be answered?
That's a good point.
That's what I'm struggling with.
Yeah, I can see that perspective, because I'm thinking that I would probably be amenable to taking action on it tonight if I had some of those pieces answered from some of the outstanding, like the fire and
Health
the
and
fire,
safety.
the health and safety piece. Like I do wonder if there's already been conversations with the Ingham County Health Department or not. And I will say that I was much more amenable to the conversation around a 7 to 7 timeframe than a 7 to 10. I think, and obviously it sounds like there might be some flexibility or openness to that, but I think that a 10 o'clock cutoff, having it located next to a bar with college students, is a little risky. I was a little more comfortable with the 7 to 7.
Mr. Bartley, I was going to ask, do we require a motion to actually engage in in-depth conversation of whether or not we should suspend the rules?
It's a great question. They have a motion for discussion.
Because
Yes.
if the motion to suspend the rules fails, it doesn't kill the application, correct?
It wouldn't kill the application, but you wouldn't take a vote tonight.
Okay. So,
And if I may, I guess in consideration of the sort of compressed timeline that's being requested, if you were inclined to approve this tonight or recommend approval, I would suggest conditioning that approval on the hours of operation. And I have added some lines in the sample motion, so you could add those. I wanted to sort of allow us to be able to respond to the discussion, but also to make this subject to the review and approval of the fire department, police department, DPW, and the DDA. I meant to mention that this is within the DDA boundaries because of the timing. The DDA won't be able to see this until October 23rd, which could potentially be after the city council approves it, if they were to approve it, which, if there were a motion and approval recommendation tonight, we could take it to the city council next week, which would be before the DDA would have a chance to see it. So if you were to approve this, I would suggest a condition of approval saying this is subject to the review and approval of those bodies, fire, police, DPW, and the DDA. It would be a little strange to have the DDA looking at it after it's technically been approved, but if you condition your approval that way, they would still have a bite.
so then even if council were to approve it and the DDA didn't approve it, well, I guess unless council changed the conditions.
Correct.
Yeah.
Councilman? I just want to note that it's very unlikely that the city council will take action without hearing from the DDA first.
Okay.
I can't think of a time when we've done anything in the DDA district without first getting the DDA's advice with regard to it.
When does the DDA next meet?
October 23rd.
Was it the same day as us? That would be the same day as the next planning commission.
And they meet earlier in the day, so that would be,
So the next city council meeting after that is November 19th.
yeah.
Landon, what's the likelihood that, if, say, in a hypothetical world, we were to, I'm making it up, but say we were to approve this with the various conditions that you mentioned, what's the likelihood that we would have heard back from the health department and fire and public works by October 23rd?
I think that it's likely from the city departments. I couldn't speak for the health department.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think you'd have to condition a lot of things if you were gonna take it up tonight. 2 entry exit points in the fence, approval, review and approval of fire, police, DPW, and DDA, hours of operation. I think this might fall under the DPW, but the proper maintenance of ice and sidewalks, I think that was a concern that was raised. So, you know, I'm certainly sympathetic, but it's not a situation we created. So, is there a motion or further comment, and then we can proceed either way?
To me, it sounds like nobody's coming to make that decision.
Okay.
Maybe we should table it to the next meeting. I mean,
Well, we would need to. It would be up, I think, automatically.
So just to clarify, if the planning commission takes no action tonight, you would
Yeah.
see this at your next meeting
yeah,
The 23rd.
on the
yeah.
23rd.
yeah,
I think we also have a lot of people out tonight,
yeah.
Yeah.
so, and they're probably gonna have a lot of questions, so. Okay.
Yeah, I think assuming, at least my personal opinion is assuming that those conditions were to be met, I would be very comfortable with it moving forward. I think that if we wait until October 23rd and potentially we have some more of that context, we'll be in a better situation to make an educated decision.
That's valid. And I share that sentiment. Vice Chair, did you?
Yeah, I understand the need for wanting to get this done as quickly as possible by the applicant, but it doesn't seem like it's going to go to city council until mid-November anyway, so I would feel more comfortable waiting until next
Okay.
meeting to make a decision.
Noted. So, okay. Thanks, everyone, and thank you for coming in. Apologies for the timeline. All right, so that takes us on to item number 7, old business. There is none, so item number 8, new business. 8.1, a request for a representative for the CD Advisory Committee. Landa, do you want to give an overview of this?
Yes, thank you. Pull up my. Okay. I'm sorry, I'm having a little more difficulty here. So the City of East Lansing has a annual Community Development Advisory Committee. This is a defined commitment that takes place in beginning in December and it wraps up the end of February, typically with 4 meetings that take place in weeknights, 6 p.m. Vice Chair Wagner has served for the past couple of years on that advisory committee, and they're requesting Planning Commission representation. I think that's it. Would you like me to describe anything more, or?
I don't. So, I don't know. Vice Chair, you can give a brief overview of your experience on this body.
Well, I think it's a really worthwhile thing to do. I've done it for the last 2 years. You get to meet people from other commissions. You get to hear about super interesting things that volunteer organizations are doing in our community. And it's kind of fun to figure out like how to divvy up the funds. So I can't go to 2 of the 4 meetings this year, so I can't do it again. I also recommend, new people. I think most of the commissions only send people for 1 or 2 years anyway. So I would like to, I highly recommend it. And it's not that much time, but I think Matt Apostle and Heather Pope are fabulous to work with. It's a really great experience. So please, someone else take the torch and move forward.
And if I may, I'm sorry, I misspoke.
Lan's going to do it.
There's actually 5 meetings, not 4.
Well, I think the last one is a reserved meeting in case one of the other ones is canceled.
Yeah.
But
So,
I guess 5 meeting slots that you have to keep open,
Yeah.
oh, right.
just in
right,
case.
right.
Well, and I'm interested, but I have a conflict that keeps me from going to 2 of the meetings. I regret that the time, the conflict is there, because I was interested in this last year.
I guess the last thing I'd mention is that the committee asked for a decision by November 8th. So if the planning commission can't decide tonight or wants to wait until the next meeting, you
That's
have
what
that
I was
option.
gonna say. I was
Let's
down
do that.
4 members. It seems like the members up here can't do it. I mean, I'm already gonna be on 1, potentially 2 groups, aside from this, and I'm already spread pretty thin, so I want to dedicate my full attention to it. Because we have 4 members absent, I think we push this to the next meeting and we have a conversation about who would be the appropriate member to be recommended.
Okay,
And I don't believe that requires a vote, does it?
correct.
Okay. All right. That is, sounds like it's a plan, so I think we can move on to the next agenda item,
Okay.
which is item 8.2, an overview of potential zoning ordinance amendments, which are in a nice table in our agenda packet. So, Mr.
Yes.
Bartley, do you want to give an overview?
Yes, so over the last several months, planning and zoning staff have been learning the zoning ordinance. As you know, I have the most longevity with the planning and zoning staff, and I've just been here just over a year. So we've been all learning and getting to know this code, and I would say getting to love, but we've noticed some inconsistencies in some places and some clarification needed. So we're proposing a raft of potential amendments to the ordinance that are all intended, except for one, to be clarifications and corrections. And I'd like to go through those briefly, but I just want to point out that there is one amendment that's proposed that would be a little more substantive, and that would be to introduce a standard for site plan review that would speak directly to stormwater impacts, potential stormwater impacts of a site plan. There's been a lot of discussion recently among council and other commissions about recent flooding and potential for serious negative impacts of development on how properties can manage stormwater. And so we wanted to essentially introduce a review for approval of a site plan that would speak explicitly to site plan, or to stormwater management. As you can see, none of these ordinance amendments are written out. We haven't developed the language yet because we wanted to give you an opportunity to review them and see if you had questions, if you felt like something wasn't necessary, or if you feel like something is missing. There was a comment earlier in public comment about definition of a story. We do have a definition of story, so we don't need to add that. But we're looking at adding several definitions, clarifying some definitions. We found that, for example, pools are not necessarily considered open space, or maybe they don't meet ground coverage requirements. So these are all sort of corrections or clarifications that are based on our experience administering it for development projects where there's been confusion. I wonder if I can just say, have you review this? Do you have any questions, specific questions, or I'm happy to go through each one.
I can defer to the commission, but I don't know if you need to go through each one. I've read them all, but Commissioner Lapine, did you have a comment? Sorry.
I was just curious about the non-conforming use of a structure and the proposed change to clarify that improvements that bring a property closer to compliance are permitted even if they don't bring the property into full conformity.
Yes.
Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Sure. So right now, you have a situation where there may be a structure that's not the principal building, for example, but say a garage that is too large from the existing ordinance. So maybe it exceeds the total amount of building or ground coverage. And the applicant says, well, the garage is 800 square feet. I really only am allowed 600 square feet, but I want to change, in my site plan, it's going to end up reducing it down to 780 square feet. it's not conforming to the code at that point, but it's getting closer to conformity. And so in many ordinances, if you're getting closer to conformance with the code, staff could allow that, or that could be allowable, I guess, throughout the process, through the approvals process. Right now, we don't have that mechanism. So any applicant would have to bring their entire site into conformity if they make a change to the site. It's an approach that we can take and that we have been taking. It's a little bit hard for some developers, or some smaller developers especially, to be able to meet that standard.
Does that change come with a time frame of when you would need to come into complete compliance, conformity?
Well,
Or could you
that's a
just-
question I wanted to ask actually tonight. I'm glad you brought that up, because there could be a threshold, and we're currently not proposing one, but there can be, let's say, if there's more than a 25% change in the amount of nonconformity. At that point, you must bring it all the way, or 50% change. We just weren't sure what that might be, and we can, if this amendment is something that you're interested in bringing forward, we could develop language and then include a section that would talk about a threshold for bringing it to conformity. That would be the kind of feedback that we're looking for tonight.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be something tonight, but maybe if we see this again, I would be interested in a conversation around some level of a threshold, because I would hate to design a structure that, I mean, I know that staff and council and many groups put a lot of work into, setting the specifications for what is a conforming structure and building. I would hate to create a loophole that allows for a developer to never get into conformity. I don't think that would be ideal for us in this community.
So I'm trying to think of some hypotheticals there. Could an example be like if somebody has a deck that's grandfathered in, it's non-conforming, it's too large for the property, but they're proposing, instead of keeping it, they want to reduce the footprint of it and put a Trex deck in that's like 75% the shape, but it's still non-conforming. But overall, it's kind of a win-win, because the city gets an improvement on the site, and then they get a deck that is good for their property. That kind of an example, or does it apply more to commercial sites?
No, it would be anything.
Okay.
But that example tracks. So essentially you're saying, right now we're saying you must bring your property into perfect conformance.
Yeah.
Versus saying you're getting there, we'll allow good. Right? So we'll allow better. We don't require perfect.
Another thing, I spent a lot of years working on septic code legislation, and there was a lot of provisions in there about somebody has a septic tank that's failing, and they could make modifications to it, but it doesn't meet code standards, but you're fixing it enough so that the leakage isn't going into the streams nearby. So that's kind of an example. As I say, we don't have septics here, or many septics here. So I don't know. It's an interesting concept. I think with anything else and anything on this list, I'm going to need to kind of see it on paper, but I'm just trying to understand the intent and the implications. So it's kind of a good faith thing. So if somebody does a good faith effort to try to improve something for the community, that they're not punished for it.
Yeah, I would just say, I think there's and certainly when we see language or when we talk about this further, we can kind of hash that out. But I think there's a considerable difference between you have a deck on your personal home that's out of, that's non-conforming, versus you have a new developer that's come in and purchased a piece of land that's not conforming and not making the necessary changes over time. I think those are two very different things.
Sure.
Right.
To be clear, the difference, between, I guess, nonconformity is that the code has changed, right? And it was legal when it was first built. And so something has happened that is no longer legal. So you won't have for example, a vacant property. You might have it be a non-conforming size, for example, but anything built on a vacant property would have to conform completely.
Yeah.
That's not, I don't think that's the question you were asking.
No.
I'm sorry.
No, that helps.
Okay.
It does help.
But for the purposes of tonight, we're just basically saying the things on this list, should you explore further and put some stuff on paper so we can actually have a conversation?
Yes.
More
The
in
next
depth
step,
about it.
this doesn't require any action. I'm just looking for feedback. The next step would be to develop language that would reflect all these amendments, and then send it to council, which would be on November 19th, for introduction and referral back to you, so that they would be saying, okay, now we're looking at this language, and we're going to introduce it and send it to the planning commission to go through the rezone or the text amendment process.
So the impetus, though, is for the green code study group for this?
No, this is
No,
not
it's
meant
not?
to be, so these amendments are meant to just essentially be clarifying the code and not be policy changes. And we expect that the Green Code Study Committee, that we can talk about in the next item.
Just the next agenda item.
More.
Yeah, but your letter here says, like, these regulations are considered closely by Green Code Study Committee that's being formed. So is any of this related to stormwater?
Yes, that particular, and I'm sorry, thank you. The particular amendment about stormwater and the standard of review
Yeah.
for stormwater would be similar to those that are going to be contemplated by that study committee. But that's the only amendment
Oh, this is.
that's meant to be any kind of policy change. And that's meant to just sort of almost be a stopgap. While the Code Study Committee considers stormwater, the stormwater standards, guidelines, and requirements, which will be their major focus at the start of this committee.
Yeah.
This would be a somewhat easier text amendment to introduce.
Okay.
We can just say, you must consider your stormwater impact when designing your site plan.
Yeah, and I just didn't see anything in this specific to, like, site plan, concrete reduction, or drainage, eaves trough regulations, anything like that.
And that was because we were concerned about
This is more fixing things than adding new.
making any policy changes or any changes to regulations.
Thank you for clarifying.
This is
That's-
more to be corrections.
Okay.
Clarifications.
I think you're on the right track. Those are the two notes I had, but it sounds like those deviate from what you intended. So I don't know if there's any other comments or questions.
Kudos to
Commissioner
you and
Overby.
your staff for making this review. And I've done this kind of work, and it's arduous and important. And thank you for doing this.
Well, thank you, Commissioner. And I would just specifically give a shout out to our associate planner, Grace Whitney, who developed this table and did a lot of the legwork in identifying these issues. So, thanks.
Second that as well. So, okay. Good work, and we'll continue the conversation at the next meeting or potentially later. I don't know, to be determined. All right, so that takes us on to item 8.3, consideration of the composition of a proposed green code study. So
Yes.
for this item, before we get into it, we're down 4 members. I don't know if there's a deadline for appointing people to this too, but this one might be ideal to postpone as well.
Yeah, the intent tonight is more to discuss this Green Code Study Committee and I guess determine if the Planning Commission, the commissioners who are here, have ideas or specific organizations or certain subject matter experts, or a general idea of how would you see this Green Code Study Committee being formed. We have a general, I guess, our sort of general parameters that we suggest is no more than 13 members.
Okay.
Probably include Planning Commission, Transportation Commission, Commission on Environment, and Building Board of Appeals. Beyond that, we don't necessarily feel, again, this is sort of staff's idea based on conversations between myself and DPW staff of what a good study committee could look like. We're looking for feedback and ideas, and then we'd bring back a more well-formed committee structure for you at the next time to make a formal motion to convene a committee.
I know the answer to a lot of these is probably going to be, that's your decision to make. But is this internal commission members, external folks? Like,
both.
Okay, both.
I would say this is similar to the Mass Timber Study Committee that you formed early this year, that concluded its work in May and June. I would say they're probably still potentially acting until the City Council looks at the Mass Timber Ordinance, which will be next week. But this would be a very similar sort of process, although I think it would be a larger scope and would take longer. I don't expect that this would last much later than middle of 2026.
I don't know if there's any comments or questions on that, and then I'll kind of chime in. For me, for the mass timber thing, I think what was really helpful is when you presented us the list of what your recommendations were, and then we had a conversation about that. I think you're right in line with the commission folks that should be on it, and a couple external stakeholders. I'm trying to think of a few. Somebody from I don't know if somebody from MSU would be appropriate. Yeah, I don't know. I just don't, I don't really have a background in that space to make those recommendations, so I would love to see what you have in mind. I think you're on the right track as far as number and like composition of just like, if we could have a list of what you recommend and then we could go from there, I think that'd be helpful.
I feel like Commissioner DeMott will have some really good recommendations on
I
this.
think she'd be great for it. We should
Yeah.
just appoint her
I know,
tonight.
I think we should appoint her
No, I'm just
tonight.
kidding.
Well, and that was one piece that just a quick question, there is that, included in here, Landon, the piece about, the next step would be to consider other related topics, including tree removal. And we've obviously had a lot of conversations about tree removal, in the last 6 months, 8, whatever.
Yeah.
So am I interpreting this correctly, that we, the planning commission, would discuss the types of things that this group would focus on, or that this group could focus on all of the things that are listed in there, including the tree removal?
I guess the impetus for the committee in general sort of came from these recent cases,
Yeah.
including tree removal, discussions about, is this the right process? Is this the right incentives or penalties? And then there was discussion about, should there be different landscaping requirements? And then there was discussion about, there was a recent text amendment that we did earlier this year about solar and electricity, EV charging, and the EV charging was specifically taken out to give a little more time and to have some committee work. And so that would be there. And then there was a discussion of, should we do a larger code audit? And then we said, okay, this needs to be a committee. And that's why this was formed. And then there was a discussion of a moratorium, a development moratorium, based specifically on concerns about stormwater impacts, which sort of said, okay, now this committee is going to focus on stormwater at the start. Once they have recommendations for council, planning commission, council, et cetera, then they'll start moving on to other topics, which would include tree removal, et cetera, that I have listed.
And my last question is, would this committee make recommendations to this group, to any group, directly to city council? What would that look like?
We expect that, well, it kind of depends on the recommendation.
Okay.
I would expect that several outcomes of the committee's work will be ordinance amendments, which for the zoning ordinance would certainly start here and go to council. I would expect that we're going to have involvement by all the commissions that are represented on this committee. I would imagine it would be recommendations
that's helpful
to
to me.
commissions, but to change ordinances would go to this commission and the council.
I was trying to figure out how it fit in my brain, so that's helpful.
Commissioner Overby, did you have a question?
I do. Landon, how would this committee avail itself of expert opinion? For example, stormwater, if we can appoint people to the committee that can provide that, but there might be other areas where the committee member, if we bring in experts as a committee member, then we all of a sudden have a committee of the whole that's going to be unmanageable. So how would we do that?
I would.
And maybe that's yet to be developed.
Well, no, this has been a topic of a lot of conversation among staff, particularly with DPW yesterday. I met with DPW staff and their current consultants that are working on their wet weather resilience plan. And that was some discussion is saying, we want to make sure that the committee doesn't necessarily over-recommend or step in where this plan is already taking place. Make sure that this is complementary, I guess, to that process that's going on. So I expect that it would differ somewhat from the Mass Timber Committee in that we had subject matter experts on the committee itself, where we might be bringing in more outside consultants to help advise the committee and say, here's what we know, here's what you're already working on, and sort of help them focus their discussions and recommendations. So I see bringing in outside consultants as being much more of an activity for this committee than our previous study committees.
Mass Timber, to me, is much more focused than this. And so whoever is on this group is going to need lots of outside help and advice and consultation.
And a lot of staff time.
And yes,
We expect we have
yes.
3 to 4 staff that will be working on this quite a bit, very closely.
Thank you.
So I'm hearing that general support, and
Yes.
you'd like to see more detail and sort of more recommendations from staff as far as the makeup of the committee next time.
That's what I'm hearing too.
Wonderful.
Yep.
And our intent would be to essentially convene the committee as soon as possible after the next planning commission meeting to hopefully start work in November.
Okay. Thank you.
Good deal.
Thank That
Thank you.
concludes that. So that takes us on to item number 9, commissioner concerns. I know it's late, so I hope there isn't any. All right, seeing none, motion to adjourn is in order.
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Lapine, seconded by Commissioner Overby. Seeing no discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We are adjourned at 9:58 PM. This was.